What is happening, fam? It is your boy, the Sultan of Sativa, the Ayatollah of Indica, the Bobby Fischer of BHO, aka the Hickson of Hash, aka the Gordon Ryan of Ganj, aka President United Bakes of America, Donald Blunt, aka Abraham Lincoln, aka Willie the Cool Penguin, aka Lord Bongtimore, and I'm here today with a brand spanking new episode of Let's Toke About It, episode number 100, with a super cool guest. He is the Hank Aaron of hardcore. He is the Bobby Kennedy of beatdowns, entrepreneur, union man, jiu-jitsu practitioner, cosplayer, Joe Hardcore McKay.
Oh man,
What's
thank
up,
you
man?
thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. I had to dig deep in my clothes that are hidden away that I don't really wear so I could bust out a really old
Oh
favorite
shit.
TUI t-shirt from back in, I don't know, 2012 or 13,
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah.
Little I'm having a
You know,
hardcore legend in the building. I need to bust out some of my hardcore legacy, you know?
that's awesome, man.
I know.
Watch wearing that shirt in Baltimore. These young kids will steal it,
100%. And then they'll just try and sell it on Depop for
dude.
$1,000.
It's crazy. Shirts are
Like,
crazy.
dude, I had no clue. I was pulling some of my stuff out, like just looking some stuff up. I'm like, damn, I still don't think I could part with this t-shirt though. I just love this baby blue. You know,
Oh,
my
I love a blue shirt. I love a
you
blue shirt.
know, turquoise is
Look
the
at
new
that.
black. There,
I got the
there you
Mind Force
go.
in blue. You know.
You know,
Uh,
um, and TUI. Obviously, I grew up in the hanging around the hardcore scene. You know, I was a lot more like kind of on the punk side, much more drug friendly. But the hardcore
like
scene,
like
and
like leftover crack punk rock or what?
that's actually what really got me into punk was
Yeah.
Choking Victim, Leftover Crack. I actually just reached out to Stizza. Me and him are working on scheduling an episode too,
Oh, that's
uh,
awesome.
which is like another opportunity to interact with somebody cool that has had a huge influence on my life. Uh, but the Baltimore scene was crazy when I was a teenager. Early 2000s, it was wild. I got to really enjoy seeing the scene in Maryland. We went up to Jersey a lot. I had some buddies in a metalcore band, Summer's End, and
Okay.
they were constantly playing in Jersey. And I think that might be around the time that I had first heard about you
Uh oh.
was on an episode of the old TV show Gangland.
Oh shit.
um,
Oh.
and so like I was familiar kind of with the FSU scene just from hanging around in Philly and Jersey, just seeing, and I always thought that shit was so crazy how some of the crews, I mean, it was almost like some hood shit.
50-50,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
think about East Coast cities in general, and you got to think about from where us specifically came from, a neighborhood that graffiti was, I would say, the best way to put it is a very large portion of Philadelphia is broken up all by different cliques or crews of graffiti people. I mean, going back as far as the 70s, throughout our entire childhood, this stuff was like on the walls. Like my mom wrote graffiti in the 1970s.
Damn.
But we're not talking like a gangster crew. They were called the Hip City Swingers at the time. You know, and various uncles and such of ours, throughout our entire like friend group, all of them were either in some kind of bike thing or in some other kind of sitting on the corner getting in trouble thing, or later on when it come to the 80s and 90s. Look at the crack epidemic. There was legitimately, we didn't do Bloods and Crips. That wasn't something that's ever really been in a city. It's always been organic street level crew stuff. So, between hardcore already having that kind of thing from its outset to when it landed us, we were emulating, like We were taking what was around us and just adding to it. And, you know, for some people who are in the hardcore scene that grew up in cul-de-sacs and far from that kind of thing, the stuff levied at us was like, you know, fake gangsters and all this kind of shit. And, you know, yeah, you know what? We weren't really trying to break into banks, brother. Sorry. You know, like we weren't trying to Scarface it up. But I still actively believe, regardless of any pushback, that the stuff that hardcore crews have done and continue to do doesn't get not that we're looking for a fucking parade here, but a lot of us, including myself, stood up pretty tight and pretty strong for a lot of years and watched the last real elements of like pure Nazi stuff, which you've seen in Maryland, which you've seen in Delaware, which you've seen in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and all across the East Coast. The people that I came up under who were hardcore people were also in crews. So we were just emulating everything around us. And we just happened to be towards the end of the last. I can't even tell. I was telling the other day to a friend. I don't think I can recall, probably, but it would take a minute. The last time I seen a whole ass group of straight up not like real Nazis, and I just was like, but our childhood was spent, you know, at hardcore punk shows in the East Coast, where there was definitively two complete sides. There was definitely, you know, sometimes the venue called for, like, there was a Misfit show at the Electric Factory where the Nazi guys showed up and they said, "We ain't here to fight. We ain't wearing no shirts. We just want to see the band." And then they told the older guys that, and the older told us, "All right, leave them guys alone. You know, we're going to have beef tonight." And then tons of times we got beat up for being young and around a bunch of Nazis, and via this, sometimes 3 or 4 Nazis roll into a show and they would get it from us because we had the numbers. And that's the stuff that we carried on in that regard of that's like when that stuff come, it didn't like organic, like, you know, like I read like comments from that kind of stuff and people do the Bloods and Crips analysis, and there was never anything like that in hardcore. In fact, hardcore, way before we were involved in it, you know, did the same thing from the New York people. I mean, Los Angeles is one of the best example. The lads from California were very deep in the Olympic Coliseum days, which is like literally almost 40 years ago to this day. There was a huge venue down there before hardcore was even big, and the lads ran the ran. Like, that's a big part of the hard, and it's always been in hardcore. Some people don't like the idea of it, so they denigrate it, but it by nature has been there before most of the people who don't like it were alive. And my position stands that for most of it, and for most of it now, and for most of us, we already organize ourselves in these friend groups, and by way of, you know, being supportive of each other in a way of, you know, like letting everybody know this is who we roll with. That's how it always was, man. And
100%.
anything fantasy involved in between is subject to internet nonsense. Does that make sense?
100%. 100%.
You know?
Well, and you touched on actually being at shows and fighting real Nazis. What cracks me up is the newer generation of people talking about being, "Oh, you're not an anti-racist." It's like, well, me and my friends actually fought real skinheads in the street in real fights.
Yeah.
When have you ever perpetrated violence upon another human who is acting in a racist manner?
It's not,
You know,
it's not even available to them. The most recent stuff with the Patriot Front in previous years, that's a federal op. You see people,
100%.
I mean, and then this newer thing in Ohio I just saw where these guys are running around with a goofy like Timu swastika flag. It's just to get. It's unfortunate, you know. It's propagandized through the state to keep people scared. And the fact is, this has been the, you know, I mean, I'm a big purveyor and student of the old school stuff that I missed out on. I was born in 1980, so, you know, I never would have seen the original Black Flag. I never got to see the original. All that stuff was way behind me. So
Right.
when you read this stuff, they had the real opposition in front of them. They had the consequences of large Nazi gangs And throughout the first, I'd say minimal, the first 30 years of American punk rock, you were dealing at times, depending on mostly shows. By the time you'd say, like, let's say you go to, by the time you get to the TUI thing, except for small different elements between, like, very rarely did you see a whole ass Nazi gang at something that was purely hardcore. But if you saw something that was attached to, say, whether, like, dude, there was a time when, like, you'd see dudes in, like, regular Confederate flag shirts sig heiling at Pantera. And that was, like, in the 90s when, like, I went to 90s metal shows before I was ever into like, even knew what hardcore was because of my age. Right. And there was always those quasi guys trying to emulate that kind of stuff. But my point is like, by the 2010s, a lot of it kind of slowed down. And then what was left in the last 14 years is really like the stalwart remnants of either people who are trying to bring back some kind of like era of like Nazi crew toughness. And that in itself is its own oxymoron because they, you know, by 2010, the numbers were so far against them. You know, you're not really going to get anybody recruited on, hey, we're going to go to the show and the 300 people are going to kick your ass, because that's what it was. So it literally got stomped out. And so, like, yeah, the modern pejorative is, you know, what do you do against racism? And it's like, first thing you do about it is you don't promulgate it. Second thing you do is if you see it, and when it comes to punk rock shows, when do you? I don't know. I feel tied between two things. I think people look for something to fight with the people online about, and I don't think people realize how much people have in common, more so than trying to look at, like, well, this guy said this or this guy did this, so he's this kind of person. And everybody has this, like, label they throw on somebody. But the reality is, I can say that I truly have not seen an actual in the flesh Nazi, God bless, probably in like 8 years, maybe. like when you're like, oh my God, like, they might as well be like a Bigfoot sighting at this point, comparative to the late 90s, where there was, in this part of this country, there was, every big scene had its own Nazi crew in the suburbs or in the mountain part, and they would roll down. And believe it or not, as much as people don't believe it, like, for those who don't have the concept of this, is like, that hate breed was the bigger they got. Man, them fucking first couple years where hate breed was big, you weren't fighting bro dudes, you were fighting the Nazi crews that were like, I'm trying to see this shit, motherfucker.
Yeah.
They'd come and take their shirt off, and they got a bunch of white power shit tattooed on them, and it was either, all right, we're either going to get, you know, fucked up if we don't fight them, but if we got older, I had older guys around me. I was young. You got to remember is, I found hardcore when I was very young in comparison to a lot of people. So by the time Hatebreed was getting bigger, I was only 17, 18, but we had already been instilled all this stuff. And I don't think everywhere was like us, so it's just speaking from my own, like, you know, thing, is like, we knew by then, face and name of all the major crews and the Nazis in the area. Pennsylvania, New Jersey had a lot of that shit, and we fought back regularly. And to see people now flagrantly just say the word, it kind of aggravates me, because it's like, you really wouldn't grasp the idea, and this is something that's a blessing for modern hardcore. Going to shows and not carrying a brass knuckles and all these weapons to a show because you might have to fight a Nazi gang. That's a privilege that these kids have. You know, I'm not saying it like we did you a favor, but I'm saying is, it's like, you're speaking on something that's not occurred, and you're now creating a scenario that doesn't exist. And I don't know if you're able. Actually, I will say it because it's honest. Like, I have yet to see someone who is able to actually do the kind of shit that we had to do to keep our scene free of that stuff. And so that's my point on that, you know. And we're lucky that we came up around righteous people who had their head in the game. And you know what? Like, the crazier side is like, the remnants of people who were in these Nazi gangs, the people that, you know, there's a lot of stuff to be said about indoctrination. There's a lot of stuff about saying, it's like, this is like, it's kind of like the schoolyard where you get picked. Depending on where you're at in the world, depending on who comes around you as an influence, you're going to be influenced, not by like some goofy TikToker, but you're going to be influenced to join some shit. Like, my family was heavily involved in one percenters, and luckily I had an uncle who was like, lad, this is not the world. Like this whole
Yeah.
thing's, but like still something that like some people don't encounter. Some people don't encounter a lot of different stuff. So it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard from a hardcore perspective when you have younger people who mock like, oh well, these guys are this, and you know, the word tough guy comes into play. It's like, when was the last time you seen a real fight at a show either? Like,
Yeah.
we're in a blessed time. We're in a really blessed, peaceful part of hardcore where the only battleground is these stupid comments or the stupid social media, because one on one in person, everybody's agreeable, everybody's enjoying the show, and it's a blessing. And I feel like if we could just cross the bridge from having the 24-hour a day argument about stupid shit, hardcore scene would be less feeling like it's divided. But maybe the irony is the struggle is always going to be there online, so to create this thing. But for me, I feel blessed, man. I like the idea of going to a show. I mean, again, I'll be honest with you. Like, we made it a mission to, and it took a while. It wasn't overnight. We made it a mission to make sure someone was going to one of our shows, whether we're playing the shows. And this goes from all the way, like, through all of our friends. It's like why we have such a kinship with everybody in the East Coast with stuff, because everybody was in the same mindset. We're not letting it be cool to, oh, what's up with that guy over there with the swastika pin? He's all right. No, he's not all right, man. Fam, he's not all right. He's got to go.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, the kinship was born in that, and a lot of peace came from it. And so, like, my perspective, reading the stuff when you see like people who probably have never gotten into a single fight in their entire life talking about, fighting Nazis. It's like, it's all good to you. So it's all the fire in your heart's good, but like, I've seen a lot of my friends get hurt. In the late '90s in Philadelphia, there were shootings outside of the Trocadero related to fights with Nazis. And it's a different story when you hear it pop off, and it's a different story when you see your friend bleeding, and it's a different story where that is the commonplace. And we got like a short window where it went from being a one-off to more common to a repeat to things got handled in a different manner. But it's a blessing that these people really don't have to engage in this, because there's a lot at stake. And in the modern time, with the way the federal agencies and all this shit is, and the media and the social, oh my lord, the trope the trope of everybody who's my age is, thank God we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media. But it's a blessing, because the shit that was going on doesn't exist now, and I think it's for the best benefit of hardcore that it no longer. I mean, I could honestly also say that hatred probably will always exist, and racism will always be somewhere in someone's mind, but I don't think that it's present in the Nazi form in punk rock, and unless at least, and I can't speak for anywhere outside of the areas that we play, the areas that we do, which is, and the amount of, I mean, I got some pretty decent contacts and people. I'm sure there's places like in the Southwest, maybe even the Texas people from the very beginning of punk rock always had problem with skinheads who were Nazis. Like, I can't speak for those, but I can speak for us. We're sitting pretty with not having to really worry about any Nazi shit. And it's been that way for, I can't say 20 years, but I could say well over 10 years. Well over 10 years.
And it's crazy to think about how, like, these different generations of the scene, it's just like smaller versions of the rest of life, And it's like every generation, it's like, we got to go through this so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with this. It might have its own set of problems, but the fact that I feel generally in this era, there's like a hardcore show is way more chill than it used to be.
I get bored watching. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I make this stupid joke, like, man, these kids really don't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't like, and it is super fucked up because I was back in the day, I was one of the young moshers, like one of the one
Mm-hmm.
ninja moshers. I emulated a lot of things from New York and New Jersey that I saw,
Yeah.
and
Picking up
Philly.
change.
Yeah, well, I mean, even the
Yeah.
stuff like the harder dancing that would come, like
Yeah.
in the late '90s and through the 2000s, we kind of promulgated and became like there was a time in 1999 where we were doing that. Me and Mike in Dysphoria, or on a tour with Dysphoria for Punishment Ever toured, and people didn't really do that in other places. Not to saying that we're the only people that ever come, but like we went to a couple places and people would just kind of go, well, "What are you guys doing?" Right? This is how we dance here. And
Right.
I remember people coming from out like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut would come to Philly shows when I was really young, and they were doing like an earlier version of that. We would watch like, well, this is fucking crazy because we came from
Yeah.
heavy we came from heavy metal and death metal shows where everyone was in the pit pushing and slamming each other, so it was different for us. But hardcore now, I feel like the heavier dancing, and this is a good bringing it all the way back to punk rock stuff. When you're a young kid, man, maybe you don't want to get that fucking Mortal Kombat kick in the fucking face, man. Like who wants that? I mean, I know I don't fucking want it, and I feel like in the era of COVID, which turned into TikTok and everybody from the internet emulating what they saw on that, I would much rather see a show full of kids that kind of don't have this cool ass ninja mod style, but everybody's engaged. And I'm in Shadow Realm, a band who promotes kicking people. "Yeah, come on, fucking do whatever on the pit, like that.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it gets boring to see a giant circle because there's four people kicking it. Everyone's like, I ain't getting kicked by him, and I also don't want to get kicked by him, so I understand it. But
Yeah.
because I book, I spent a lot of time booking shows that weren't just this. You know, Shit didn't go down in my casualty shows, and some of them casualty shows were insane.
Yeah.
Art, you brought up Leftover Crack. Rest in peace to Alec from Leftover Crack.
Mm.
It's my guy. We did a lot of shows together. They were always fantastic, and the juxtaposition of like, hey, yeah, I'm Joe Hardcore, known for whatever people think they know about me. They treated me with respect. We treated them with respect as a band. They always brought a great crowd. The crowd was crazy, and we definitely knew Leftover Crack, eye roll. We're gonna have to kick out some drunk, crazy assholes and funny shit. But it was kind of fun, and we all came up in punk rock.
Yeah.
I'm not a uniform wearer. I hate to say it. Like, I mean, in hindsight, yeah, it would be cool if I like showed up on day one with like giant Legion of Doom spikes on my jackets and looked crazy. But I didn't come from that. I came from a neighborhood that was very urban. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have money for real Doc Martens. Came in sweatpants and camo pants from the Salvation Army and found our way through punk rock. So like, I watch shows now and I watch younger kids who are excited. You see their eyes. They're like, yeah, this is fucking great. But there's that dude, 200 something pounds, doing that spin kick, and he's like, I ain't going in there. Whereas when we were younger, we went to smaller shows where it was the push in, and I think that could potentially be one of the worst parts of hardcore now is the younger kids have no element of punk rock in them, and they have no element of like running around and just being crazy like that. Like I went to death metal shows, the first all ages shows besides really big concerts. I was going to death metal shows in a small club, and even then there wasn't that like ninja kicking shit. And this is the early '90s. Right. It was. I didn't really see that till I went to my first hardcore show with Biohazard and Sick of It All, and I was only I was 12 turning 13. And so, but even that, it was on a smaller level. You'd go to another show, like you'd see a different kind of like hardcore band that wasn't that, and you wouldn't see this ninja kicking shit. And I again, this is like, do as I say, not as I do. Like, yeah, we did all that. We got fucking flown across the country to be in a video that was famous for that. But that's not the point. The point is it kind of takes away some of these young kids' fun the way it is now. And I'd like to see a better balance, because the shows are getting kind of boring because it's 8 kids in a room of 200 instead of 200 people going crazy. The art of stage diving's lost. Bands writing 6 sing-alongs is hit or miss. Like the elements of punk rock is completely devoid in hardcore nowadays. And it's almost like it's supposed to be a different kind of scene. And I think a lot of the elements of the social fabric of the scene stayed, but it's unrecognizable. The guy's 10 and 15 years older than me. And it's somewhat unrecognizable to people my own age. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I'm like, oh yeah, only 5 or 6 people dance now.
Yeah,
Funny.
I mean, so I was born in '88. I'm 8 years younger than you. And I went to a little fest in Baltimore at Soundstage. It was like TUI was headlining with End It and I think Time Bomb. And I was one of the hardest people going in the pit. And there was absolutely no reason for that, as I was also one of the oldest in the pit, And it's just like there was some, but they were also the guys that I've been going to see TUI with for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, I definitely can see that it's different, but for me growing up, right, I can remember like the first time I heard Choking Victim and just understanding that energy. And I was an angry suburb kid, and just feeling that and being like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so like we would go to shows and yeah, we wanted to get that energy out. We wanted to be aggressive, right? But it was like there was the element of a fight could happen, but we also, didn't necessarily want to just start fights.
Yeah. No, I mean, Choking Victim, which is a precursor to We'll Have to Have a Crack After the Fact, they had a huge impact in punk rock, and their shows were always massive. And I think, I remember seeing Choking Victim shows where you'd walk by the show and you could smell it. You got like,
yeah.
But there's that kind of like, I don't know. When you walk by that show as a kid, you're like, these people look crazy, right?
Yeah.
So you walk by a show, let's say Tsunami and Trapped Under Ice, and except for a couple wonky like kids who don't care about dressing a certain way, it looks like normal people. Maybe some,
yeah.
Maybe if it's a summer out, you'll see a couple more tattoos, but even tattoos are so normalized. Tattoos ain't even crazy anymore.
Right.
Hardcore doesn't have a visceral image anymore. And I fervently remember the differences between like the heavy metal shows. Not as many people had like got this tattoo on my arm, man. I got my tattoo.
Right.
But you didn't see the dude shirtless with a tattoo that often. But I went to my first hardcore show and I'm like, these motherfuckers are tattooed out. And then the punk rock shows, oh my god, the jackets, all the cool buttons, pins, the mohawks, the chaos. I think that maybe there was a post-marriage breakup somewhere that no one told us about, where like hardcore and punk broke up, and no one told us. But punk rock kept the wardrobe, and hardcore just got to keep the name. They were the one that lost because the edginess of the like what a hardcore show looks like now is so just like,
yeah.
I love when I see a young kid and he shows up with like a leather jacket with the studs. I love when I see kids with the fucking mohawks, because there's something intentional, and it's something that they're proud of their thing. And I don't know if granted, everybody will say I've yet to run into someone who said I never had a punk rock phase, because everybody wants to say that they know about punk rock, but like punk really isn't about the image, but like I think the modern
it's who you are.
Well, I think like the modern aesthetic is kind of everything about this is basically me saying like, it's still cool, it's happening. It's gotten a lot more normalized for regular society's use, and there's no like going home and having to hide what shirt you got from your parents, or there's no going home and having to take off all your crazy like, this is my show clothes. I mean,
yeah.
And because I was going to show like smaller clubs to see the death metal stuff as my first all ages shows. My mom was really good because I had way older friends, guys. When I was
what bands
12,
were you seeing?
Oh my god, You run the gamut of it. Everything from I seen this the first time Pantera played in the area, they opened for Skid
So
Row,
sick.
and but again, I ain't no grown man. I just got a beard 2 years ago. I mean, like I'm in here with long hair, checking out this show with a bunch of friends. And yeah, like we wanted to check out Pantera, but they were the opener. We saw Skid Row. We're like, this fucking Skid Row's gonna kick some ass, brother. Like, and my mom and her boyfriend had taken me to a bunch of metal big concerts like Kiss and things like that. So like I was already fully in. But the first show that my mom ever really took me to that I would say like was like a crazy one was Clash of the Titans 1990 with Slayer, and I watched Alice in Chains get booed off stage, and I still don't listen to them now because they got booed off stage. I love, yeah, I don't give a fuck. I got to see a lot of that kind of like era stuff, and I think now if you ask me, like I listen to a lot more Iron Maiden than I do Trapped Under Ice these days. Not because I don't love Justice, but like the records that now feel like a childhood home are in those earlier the earlier Metallica records. Metallica was like the first thing that I could say that was mine. My mom and father both had a lot of records from everybody you could think of, like the Ozzy Osbournes, the Dios, and stuff like that. But when I first heard Metallica, something went off, and I remember getting their tapes. I remember being excited for them. I remember the first time I got to see them, the second time I got to see them. Like that was like, holy shit. And juxtaposed from this was just like, like I'm a young kid. Like I literally, like, I think I was 8 years old the first time I heard Metallica. I want to say maybe 10, turning 11 the first time I seen them. But and then at that point, my mom
in their
was,
prime.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like a dick in a sense where like, yeah, I remember when the Black Album came out, and it was kind of like, yeah, I guess this is cool. I was like in 8th grade, but like by that time I was already listening to death metal. I had already I just saw Cannibal Corpse and was like, this is the shit. This is the shit.
Dude, The Bleeding, excellent record.
That's actually when that thing came out. It was again, I love death metal. It's really like my heart is in heavy metal, like, but I love all the shit. I love the underground shit. But like when I think of like The Bleeding now, like there's a track, Strict Naked Torture. Is that what it is? And and they had the Tori Amos clip on it, which then they had to take off, and like or rip. What the fuck is it? It's like track 4. But they had this thing from Tori Amos that they had to take off the record because they were making fun of her being raped. And I say this not as like I say this as a comparison here. So like Cannibal Corpse and a lot of those bands were going for extreme heavy metal vibes, provocative, incendiary kind of imagery, crazy shit, like all this stuff like meat hook sodomy and all these cool terms.
Yeah.
And today's death metal now is like some kid who's in a hardcore band who grew his hair past his ears, and it's a softer death metal. Like it's a softer death metal. It's a softer, like everything's a little softer. It's a softer death metal, and you got like there's always been chicks in metal, so I'm gonna make it. But like I like legitimately saw a girl with like an OG Cannibal Corpse shit that had like rape lyrics on it, and I was like, this is the crazy. This is like the craziest shit. But the scene moves on, and death metal was like the first chance of me having to go to shows without a parental attaché, like
Right. Excellent term.
Yeah, he was our attaché. He didn't really want to govern us, just making sure, like, all right, don't be doing that now. But like we got the opportunity to go to these shows because of that, and I think back to that, and sometimes I maybe I should have stayed at. A lot of shit would have been different for me, but the culture of long hair concerts, like I go to Iron Maiden as much as I can, though I don't go to see Iron Maiden if they're on a new record because I don't really listen to their new records. No. But
Iron Maiden.
Love them. The last time I saw them was 2019. I think they played like, I want to say they probably played like 30 songs. They might have like 21 backdrops. It was fucking awesome. You know, like that's the shit that cracks me up. And like hardcore, you're not allowed to have any of that
No.
until now. Then they all got the back. Like the amount of like from a show, we have people that show up like, well, it's a church, and they're like, where do we do the backdrop? And I'm like, well, you don't, because your shit's 20 foot tall, and this motherfucker's only like 8 feet tall from the stage to the ceiling. So like the hardcore part of me cracks up when the metal people come in and they try to pull that shit. Like the church stage is maybe 7 feet deep, and we used to have to tell the metalcore bands that like before they were too big, well, you can't really put that scrim there because then you might not have no space to play on the stage. Like, so I kind of, I don't know. I crack up the differences between the metal thing. But yeah, I went to a lot of death metal shows. And then at a certain time, once you get to, I don't think a boy after 12 or 13 should really be regulated. I think they should be like, they should be ungovernable for a bit. If they're in a pack, if they're a solo kid, you got to lock them up in a gang. Get them in with somebody. I got lucky that I was always the younger.
Same.
Up until like, let me see. Up until about 20 years ago, I was always like someone's young boy. You know, like maybe, you know, like, and I, you know, like, nowadays I'm, you know, long beard and I'm the old head, but
you're the OG, right?
Yeah, like, but you get that young kid and you're like, he's just in the group. We would go to South Street getting on the train. We would buy hacky sacks and look at cool shit and walk all over, climb trees and climb up on the L's just to fuck around. We fucked around with writing graffiti. None of us were very good at it. We did our thing. We played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of different things like that. And we were like in a neighborhood that was either not.
So
white.
where were you at?
Philly. I've always been in Philly my whole life.
South moved. Philly, North Philly?
I refuse to call it the Northeast.
West Philly?
It would be Frankfurt.
Uh-huh.
Frankfurt. I lived from my parents are from Kensington, and I did in single digits live there from time to time because they moved around a lot. But from most of the story, I lived in Frankfurt, and then all my people were from Frankfurt, or because of the fact that the neighborhoods were close. Like I have cousins who were still in Kensington until the mid '80s, and then as you start meeting people, like Chris X from This Is Hardcore, he has to get on the train, but he has to take the bus to get to the train. Well, right. My house was 3 blocks from the damn beginning of the train, so I met so many people who I've been homeboys with for over 30 years. Actually, now, fuck, I can't even think. Literally, for 30 years, I know dudes just because I'm on the train, I got a headbanger shirt on, they got a headbanger shirt on, and yo, where you go? Whose show you go? Go in the truck, brother. How about you? Yeah, now. And like some of my best friends I met because we had to take the bus home because the train would stop running at a certain time. So we'd all be on that midnight train, the midnight bus instead of the train going home, and they'd be like, yo, where are you from? And then I tell this often in my own podcast and other stories, from like 1994, say, till up to like 1997, when it started, the group started breaking up. Man, there was probably, I'd say, at least 30 people between the first L stop and the 8 L stop. And like, we all had cousins, and everyone started to find this shit. And this is partly because in the early part, not quite the dead middle, but right before the middle, the full 95 middle of the 90s, Green Day and all this stuff started being more popular. Rancid dropped that Out Come the Wolf. Our whole neighborhood used to be dudes on the corner in Fila jackets doing the House of Pain gimmick, Onyx gimmick, whatever you want to call it. But then when that punk rock started coming around, you started seeing it. And I always was a long hair. I was never, like, I was a long hair. I was a long hair until eventually, I was a long hair until November 1996. And then I cut my hair because all my friends were either punk rockers or skinheads or kept it shit. Or also we were fighting skinheads and I kept getting my hair pulled. Now I'm only 16, right. So I'm not no Mike Tyson at 16, but we're constantly at it and going at it. And I got tired of my hair getting pulled in fights. Yeah. And I went to see Agnostic Front at the reunion, and it was it. I'm like, fuck, just keep my hair. I'm gonna keep this hair down. But our whole neighborhood shifted to that kind of stuff. So we all gelled together. It's crazy. There's friends of mine now who I haven't seen in years for shows, but we all came up going to them shows, and we have that bond from being like, fuck yeah, brother, you were there at this show with us, you know?
Dude, that whole area up in Northeast, up at Frankfurt, is totally different now. There was a point in my using story where I was homeless, living in Philly, pretty much just enjoying the freedoms of being a dope head, in this great city of brotherly love. And
You know where the cemeteries are?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yep.
what our playgrounds were, because we were the long hairs, and
Yeah.
Frankfurt playground had all the kids selling crack in the basketball courts. We couldn't play there, and
Right.
then we weren't going to go play Wissanoming for the same thing. So we played football in the daytime in the cemetery on the right side. Then we were like the bad kids. Like mischief night, we had you. You were done. If you walk by one of the cemeteries, you're getting egged, you're getting bleach thrown on you. Like we were the asshole kids, you know. Like
Right.
if we weren't in the basement playing Dungeons and Dragons, we were running around throwing shit, breaking shit, you know, throwing bleach on people's clothes when they had the clotheslines out. Just straight asshole shit, you
Right.
know.
Right.
But doing that, we were on the corner. People got shot. You know, my cousin was stabbed to death when we were young. You know, like right there at Dyer Street, um, Dyer and Frankfurt under the L. And
Yeah.
so, like, you know, like the blessing of the music for me is that it kept me out of all that street shit. You know, like, um, my cousins who left Philadelphia at a young age, they'd end up going to Florida. Somehow they still ended up on the opioids, which is crazy to me that they moved away to get away from it and it still hit them. But the list of people in my life that have died from that and died under that train, or one of my boys, Spees, died almost 20 years ago. He fucking OD'd and his body sat at Church Street overnight, and it was so cold his whole body
Mm.
froze. You know, like
Mm.
I never smoked a cigarette. I never did anything recreational opioids ever, because it was there. We had tons of uncles. My dad was on crack, like actual crack, and the crack epidemic. So I didn't have a father around for a long time. But heroin and crack ruined our entire actual like inner society, you know? And like it was really hard because you don't hear it as much from like young white kids. Like, yo, I didn't have this. Like, you know, my mom was on welfare. My mom had to go out and be a stripper. You know, my mom had to do what she had to do because I didn't have a dad. And these things, you know, like I have friends who's had dads, and you find out years later that the whole time you were at their house, dad was on not before they were actual Oxycontins, when it was just like on straight up shooting up. You know,
Right.
like kept it.
Right.
I guess I would say like still had a job,
You could be like
but like a everyday user
like
of
a
heroin.
functional user. Back in the day, you would have these guys who were junkies for 20, 30 years,
I had
just
a lot of
living this
friends.
blue
I had a
collar
lot.
life,
Yeah.
supporting their family, just shooting heroin every day in
Well,
their
that's all.
toes or in their knees, you
Yeah,
know?
and I didn't, you know, like I saw my share of shit in my house, but like the idea, like when one of my friends' dads died, I was like, what happened? He's like, I OD'd. I'm like, it's your pop? I thought he smoked weed. He's like, dude, he's been on heroin for 30 years. And I'm like, around us? Oh yeah, you would never be able to know. He's like, my mom. He's like, my mom didn't even tell me till blah blah blah. And you're like, wait, what? And so like
Yeah.
the neighborhood struggled because, and I said this on the Hardcore Therapist podcast, when they took the jobs out of those neighborhoods, all them mills, all them factories were made by people who wanted to have workers. So they built houses close to the job. They had churches close to the job, schools close to the job, so a
Yeah.
family could be supported. And then when those things fell apart and fell away, well, what are you gonna do? Like, you know, like my family, like if like I have family all over from in the city, but mostly, you know, you could go from the river at Burke Street and all the way up to I would say, you might as well say from Spring Garden straight through to Bridge and Pratt. I have a family member or two or four or 8 or 10 who live off that L. And I used to live under the L. I lived 2 blocks from the L for a lot of my childhood. You know, like, I actually only recently, when I say recently, like 7 years ago, actually 6 years ago, I moved to like Mount Airy, which is even its own weird world of you got houses that are mansion looking, and I live on a cut block where there's still kids getting shot every day. But it could afford it, and I get parking, and anywhere in the city now it's hard to park. But we came up in them neighborhoods, and a lot of the stuff that probably stayed with us that kind of gave us that pushback we were talking about earlier about the fight with the Nazis came because we grew up in that element of like, if someone pushes you, you have to push back, or you're gonna be punked out, you're gonna be a bitch, and
Right.
they're gonna come at you every day at school, or every time they see you in the corner, they're gonna be like, that's the guy you get fucked with. So you learn you had to kind of stand up, and got lucky that like as we found hardcore and we saw them. I mean, my very first hardcore show, Biohazard, Sick of It on Sheer Terror at the TLA, there was a shit ton of Nazis, and you know what happened? Because I was only 12 years old, all these dudes in full ass tattoos were trying to fight the Nazis, and we had come from the death metal shit where all there was a lot of Nazis. And I was like,
Right.
these motherfuckers fight these guys? And these
Yeah,
guys are out here shirtless trying to fight them. It's actually on YouTube. If you ever get bored, you can Google it and see it. Like, and I think about it now, and it was like that ignited us. That was like, all right, yeah, fuck these guys, because it was cool to go to the metal shows, but it sucked when you're standing there and they're shirtless and they're doing the Sig Heils, and you're like, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, like what do you, like what do you do? You're fucking like, I'm a 13-year-old kid, like, you know, like,
Yeah. I'm not beating up a grown drunk man.
Yeah, it was just a different time, you know. So like, the shit now is so much different, and it's a blessing. But we came from a goofy scenario where the best place to put us was in front of these metal bands instead of being on the corner. And the guys who were at shows, some of them fell back into the corner, and some of them never came back out. I have friends who lasted as long as they could at shows, and there's a couple dudes that are still under the Ave that are my guys, and you know, like, Punishment has had 3 drummers now that have died because of the opioids. You know, like Spinal Tap level shit. You know, like,
Yep.
there isn't a year that goes by that someone from like the old group of people, I don't get the phone call, hey, blah blah blah, and then it pains you to ask, you know, but you got to say, well, what happened? Well, you know, and then when you get the then you're like, here we go. And you just think about, like, you ever see the movies where like they have a big picture with everybody, and then like, so we're 3 weeks ago, we're outside of this park doing this show for Bad Luck 13, Punishment, the Satanic Rave, and we got talking, and yeah, there's definitely people that are just not around anymore. But that park, the one that splits where Kensington and Frankfurt Ave split, right there off of Church Street. Yeah, we had punk rock shows there in 1995, 1996. We stopped by 97. We had our own other halls, but like, we were doing some of my friends' first bands in that park. And yeah, they had hookers there and people might shoot up there, but it wasn't the third world country it was that it is now. And they're letting it, they let it happen. And I say that specifically because in the 1998, I moved down to Kensington and Lehigh. And except for that park by the library, McPherson Square, you really didn't see people openly shooting up. The neighbors weren't having it.
Yeah.
And then by 2010, I was living down there. We lived in a couple different places down there. Actually, yeah, I mean, no, 2003, 2003, actually, Punishment had a song that we never recorded that was literally about, you know, Tioga L Station and the park there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, that was like, you could definitely go and walk down that street 6 a.m. going to work, and there might be an ambulance because someone OD'd in that park. And that was in the early 2000s. And then, you know, I truly do believe that they were hoping to get rid of as many of the people who are working class who can afford to get the hell out, sell their house, because they don't want Philadelphians there. They want these people who live in New York who will spend $600 on a house that's worth $200,000, live there, and they just let it go. They let it become an open cesspool, so everybody who couldn't afford it had to move. Everybody who could afford it could move. Now look it all over. They let from Berks Huntington L Station was always kind of crazy. My family lived all around there. My family lived all around Berks. All of a sudden, wow, everyone's gone. Now you got these brand new 120 unit house, nice as fuck, and all these people not from Philadelphia are moving into them. And that was their whole plan. They let our neighborhood fall apart. They let our childhood get fucked up. They let the drugs just sit there in front and eat everybody up. It's such a giant expanse of industrial area that they can't use. And they were thinking chess, not checkers. Oh, we'll just let all these people do what they got to do, and then we'll come in and we'll make it nice for someone else. And I feel like the city failed most of our entire family. Like they weren't given the resources. The schools weren't supported the way the schools were. We were kids. I say this a lot. People laugh, but until 1998, they didn't take the cars off the street that were broken into. So we used to play on fucking in these abandoned cars as kids, just for fun. We had a lot of wild dogs running around the neighborhood. And I always tell stories about that, but I'll leave that out because people are tired of hearing of that. But, we had a lot of wild shit because it was unregulated down there, but they unregulated to let it fall apart. And they let people,
Right.
Kind of sucks, man. It really does suck.
Well, and it's really honestly the same in Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore is very much like that, and all these like industrial areas kind of near the edge of the city are all now these huge, 120 unit gigantic units that are bringing in a ton of money. And, the areas where there's like the worst parts of the city are still just the worst parts, and they just try and contain it over there and build everything else up and don't care what happens. And when I was actually in Philly at about 2010. I lived, well, I say lived, but I
You slept there, so you lived there. Who
yeah,
cares?
yeah. So I would stay down by that Target right off 95 there down in South Philly, and there's like the Wawa right behind it. I'd get some food at Wawa in the morning, go steal some shit from Target, bounce up to South Street, pawn the shit that I sold at Target, go get some dope and just float around the city, skateboarding. Kind of stayed at this squat house on Fifth and Mifflin.
Oh, shit.
And dude, it was cool. There was like a couple dudes, and there was like another punk house that was not like a squat. They actually like paid bills. This place was
Fucking
just,
sellouts.
just fucking, dude. It was the least punk, dude. The guy that like I met who lived there that I kind of came in under. He was the Baskin Robbins of smells, 31 flavors. I mean, he was exactly what you think of, right? A jean jacket, vest, no shirt, just stinks, long hair. And we go down to FDR, they'd have shows over there. We get citywides everywhere. And there was like a sick sense of freedom in it. And I
Well,
really
yeah.
thought I was living this rebellious life.
Well, you were.
And as to an extent, and now at 36 though, I feel like I was the precursor to what these kids are now. Like I was what, the beginning phases of what a lot of these people are. And, honestly, I was fortunate that I got clean, at 23. And, I learned about things like personal responsibility and living with principles, all the shit that they talk about in the hardcore scene, like actually trying to apply those to my life. And I realized it feels now because when I got clean, fentanyl was still mostly in like over in Camden and Philly, and not really in Baltimore yet. And seeing how that's impacted Baltimore now, it feels like that's the plan all along. They want everyone fucked up. They want everyone weak, on drugs, sick, and a lot of even the recovery world is just an extension of the pharmaceutical industry. It's like stop taking these drugs and take these drugs.
So,
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends who were like really into Kerouac and Bukowski and all these ideas of freedom. And I read all that stuff, and I feel like yeah, like if we're talking like let's ride a train and be a hobo, yeah, that sounds crazy. But it really depends upon like what your value set is, right? So like trying to align myself to like what my value sets was kind of already a predetermined. I had my first kid when I was really young. I had to get out of high school. I had to get to jobs. I was lucky that at the era where I was working, before there was a lot of people that would come over the border and do a lot of these things, I could make $50 to $75 a day just getting a call from one of my uncles going, hey, tomorrow you're going here and you guys are going to take this drywall and put it in this basement. And, you know, you could make, I mean, my first house that we rented was $300 a month. So you're making $50 every fucking day. You got enough for rent with 1 week. So we were killing it. And little by little that got pulled away, but we got more skills. And really the only thing that the only thing that pulled me away from like being fully in the union earlier was wanting to tour and not wanting to miss that opportunity because I knew it would come later. But I had kids at a young age, and then I had the want to travel, and that little bit of travel, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 6 weeks, but I still went back, and I was working as either a cabinet maker or I was working in masonry, and at the time it was so much easier. Like, you know, it was so much easier just to find work. And then in the last 20 years, that kind of work dried up as the contractor base changed entirely in the area. But by the time I was touring with Shattered Rome in Europe, I'd already signed up to be in a union. I was looking at 15 years for court shit. And I had to straighten my ass out because I was at home. I had my daughter had come back. She was living with her on an army base where her mother was married. You know, like the city was changing, and we buckled down. You know, and it's a godsend that I saw the stuff that I saw as a kid. You know, like I'm not afraid of needles, but it's always been in front of us. So I never would have touched it. Never. I've never smoked a cigarette. You know, like I smoked weed for barely. Like, I'm going to say this truly, like, maybe there was an experimental period when I was like 12, 13, but I didn't like it. And then from the time I was like 17, turning 18 till 19. And then when my friend killed himself the very next day, I said, I'm never doing anything again. And me and him were out there drinking Mickey's 40s, smoking weed with dust in it, you know, like, and getting it on. But I never did anything hard, you know, like when I broke my jaw twice in 1998.
That's a rough one.
Well, I was dumb. I was fighting, got my jaw broke, then I was fighting with my jaw broke and broke it again. But they put me on that little button you hit, and you're in paradise. And I immediately knew why people were addicted. And I said to myself, this will never be me. And I kept it, man. And like I count me being straight edge from December 4th, 1999. So it's been almost 25 years. And, you know, like too many funerals for young friends, too many funerals for old friends, too many funerals for friends' parents or kids now. Kids are overdosing here. And you see it. I have a disdain for it because I live there. You know, like I literally had hookers eating fucking like out of our trash because we live next door to a pizza store. I had my car broken into a lot. That neighborhoods, that was my playground. I could tell you every street. We could walk around and say, "Oh, my cousin was here." I could tell you a story for years. I don't even ever want to go. My sister lives down in the River Wards, and a lot of my boys still live in the River Wards. But like, aside from me doing a show down there, or maybe having to go here or there 1 or 2 times, I don't want to go down there anymore because it just reminds me of everything that went bad. You know, like at the time of your life when you're out there playing on bikes and you're fucking around because of the crack epidemic, which preceded this heroin epidemic. Dude, you want to talk about people getting shot all the time? Crack was like in its own. My dad stole everything from us, you know, like, and everyone's family ended. You know, like you see this shit. It really did rip up the entire like the family units of. And that's the thing that don't get talked about. You see the solitary junkie or addict, whatever word you want to use, and you don't realize like the family that's ripped up from it, you know? And, you know, like I got a handful of people are left in my life who, if they die of heroin, that I would actually be like, and then the rest of them I just write them off. And it sucks to write somebody off, but it's kind of like that Geico commercial. Oh, you're a little bit close, like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't
You
do it,
got the
man.
dollar bill. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do it anymore. Brace your heart, and it's a sad thing, man.
Well, and what's really crazy because I 100% agree. And when you're using it is a really selfish thing, and you really, at least for me, I felt like fuck everyone else. I'm only hurting myself, and it was only once I got clean and I had different perspective and made some amends that I was really able to get how much. And now even still at 36, there's certain things that my mom will do that I'm like, damn, she still has this trauma response from when I was 21 years old acting a fool at her house, and somebody was overdosing in my bedroom, or cops were showing up at random hours of the night. And that's everyone now. Every family has someone in their family that is struggling, or has died.
It's a thing, man. And like the closer it is to you, like I've had it as close as it can get to me. At times I was naive to it, and naive to the use and all those things. And I don't have anger towards it. I have like the sadness and the feeling of like, all right, well, I must be a level of straight edge that that I'm oblivious to it, like in my own fucking house. Like it sucks.
Right.
And I do pray that I have kids, but they're one's closest to being an adult. Actually, is technically an adult, and all my other kids are adults now. I pray that they stay on the path that they're at, so they never have to fall back to that,
Right.
because it's such a fucking mortal struggle, and I can relate to why it happens. Look at what they gave us. Like look at what's out there. Look what was out for us. Like
Right.
by 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 happenstance, by just simple connections of knowing a lot of people, and the bizarre factor. Like I got into the union when I was 26 because of a guy I met in hardcore who could get me in a union, but he didn't live in Philly. He lived somewhere else. But he's like, yo, I'm with this company now. I just moved down this way. Do you want to join? And I'd always said, and it's like this weird Philadelphia thing. Like, I always kind of knew, well, eventually I'm gonna have to join a union just to get my ass in order, like, and
Right. Right.
but that's my whole friend group. That's a lot of my people, like, you want to know somebody who could do something? I got you. I got you on everything, like, but it was always taken for granted because there was all this available work. But it took somebody from hardcore to actually be the one like, hey, I can get you in right now. I was building cabinets for a company. I had a job. And he was like, you'll make more money doing this. And I was like, fuck it, let's roll. And that's been the saving grace of the responsibility. And then it isn't it some people say, well, it's a what's it say? Like it's a carrot on a stick, the cartoon where the horse walks.
Right.
But it's no, it's trading your time for the money that will give you something that could last. Like go to work, you got money. You don't have to worry about bills. You're not going to stress yourself. You can buy food. You can do these things you have to do. Not a big fan of taxes, but it is what it is. I'm not a big fan of this high crazy rent now in these hood areas. It sucks. I can't wait to not live in Philadelphia anymore because of it. But the responsibility that is now ingrained in me in my mid 40s to just like I sprained my ankle 2 weeks ago and I haven't worked. Well, actually, I think but I think it's gonna be about 2 weeks now. I still get up at 3 and 4 in the morning because that's what the fuck I do. That's what I've been doing my whole adult damn dumb life. It's like get up early and go to fucking work because that's what we do. But a lot of the guys who fell into the trap younger, they either had it. Like I had a cousin who, man, this kid had. When they say had everything, the kid could have had everything. My Uncle John even told him, he's like, all you have to do in life is breathe. I got you on everything else. He owned his own business, and his son ended up on the drugs. You would never think a kid who lived in the woods of New Jersey would end up on the drugs. And there's just something psychological, psychosomatic, some kind of reactionary where they don't react to, look what my father has, I'm going to build something like her, I'm going to take this over. They push against it. And maybe it's punk rock, or maybe it's being an asshole, or maybe it's innerly not seeing something in their father that they want to be, so then they push against all of it. But I know so many people that had talent. I mean, some of the guys who passed that I truly love that died from this shit. It behooves me to say this, but I feel like a generation of my peers died, and loss of talent, loss of ideas, loss of abilities, and just artistic expressions gone. Like, I learned early doing graffiti that it became a compulsive disorder. And again, I'm fucking crazy. So once I realized I'm watching my friends with no crayons and nothing in their hand and they're still moving, I'm like, all right, I don't want that. Like,
Yeah.
but it's the truth. I got a lot of friends that died of graffiti. And I say died of graffiti because graffiti became the outlet to end up being on the opioids. I got one or two guys left, and they're still living, and they still play with the drugs, and it saddens me because it's like it's the Russian roulette, man. And when they pass, when they pass, I don't think I have the heart. I think I'm out of emotions for it, Like, but these are my last of my guys because they've been there since day one, and they're still on this shit, and they're somehow still alive, and they don't have the best stories, and there's empathy of like why they're where they're at, but it's like, brother,
At what point do you?
like, you've been on heroin longer than this damn opioid crisis happened out here,
Like I have a friend who I met actually the first time I ever went to rehab, and him and we used together a bunch, and then I got clean, and that was almost 14 years ago, and he still is in that world, and I just has lost his kid to his mom has to take care of his kid, and he's losing this house that his dad gave him when he died, and
Jeez.
blowing it, and I'm like, I'm not nice to him anymore. I'm like, you're fucking up, like,
You have to.
there, and it's like, I set the example for me. I got clean in a pretty traditional sense, right? Did the 12-step thing for a couple of years, was completely abstinent, decided I didn't want to do any medication, decided to reincorporate weed into my life. And, obviously that kind of disqualifies me in the 12-step realm. They're like,
I'll say this. My father was on crack cocaine. My father used a lot of different drugs. From 2000 to 2003, actually up to 2004, I would a couple times I'd live at my mom's house, but then me and my dad started doing we were physically building a lot of stuff together. Like, his brother owned his own cabinet shop. It was small, so we didn't have work all year. And I worked in big cabinet shops in those neighborhoods. So we would work together, and he would call me, hey, because it's seasonal. Like, this job gets slow, this job doesn't. And my father was a really, I hate how good he was at what he did, and how stupid of a person he was at the same time with his own decisions. Because he was so talented, it's just, it sucks to know when you have a God-given gift and talent and you don't use it to what you should have could have used. And I would live with him. We would share rent. I mean, that one house I had, literally, like, it was $350, good house, and we both split the rent. We were making 4 times that a week, so we had a cheap house. We started doing a side business, and things went awry. But my dad beat being on hard drugs by smoking weed. And he literally was ahead of this whole weed. He's like, I remember as a child, like 6, 7 years, if they just legalized this weed, you'd smoke it and go into a restaurant, you'd be able to eat more. Like, I heard all the rhetoric about like legalizing weed. And so I'm not a purveyor. I'm not ever gonna do it. But at the same time, you gotta figure is he was born in 63, so he was 32, 33 when he was finally like truly off hard drugs in a real sense. And it was because he just was smoking weed. And he smoked weed all the time, which I remember that growing up. But the crack got him somehow. I don't know where, I don't know why, but the crack got him. And we lost him for a lot of years. But when me and him were cool about 20 years ago, he would smoke. Every once in a while, he'd drink like 1 or 2, I forget the kind of beer because I'm not really Corona or something like that. But like, my dad just sat there, he chain smoked, but he smoked a lot of weed, and he was clean. And that was the best era from him and I. So if medicinally marijuana keeps you from the harder stuff, then God wills it. Because it's not about
100%.
Someone's 12-step may be someone else's, hey, we're going to use weed and we're going to let it be. And you have to support the like it would be an asinine for me as someone straight edge being like, well, man, you're smoking weed, so you're not clean. It's like, what keeps you alive and going to work every day? Do you know how many of my homeboys don't want to have a union job? Because a lot of union jobs, not all, but the prevailing opinion is a lot of union jobs eventually have drug tests, which is hit or miss. There's tons of companies and tons of things where they don't drug test. But I got a lot of dudes that still work non-union because like, nah, I like to smoke my weed right out in the open. And I've poured concrete with I've poured concrete guys that smoke right out in the open. It's their whole thing, but it keeps them going to work every day, keeps them in their family life. And if that's what it takes, again, it's not for us to decide. It's up for God. And that's up, like if you're alive and you're not under the L and you're not sleeping in a car, you're not stealing from someone, you're not shooting up, and you smoking weed and you get to go to sleep a little bit earlier, or maybe you're a little bit more hungry versus I'm going to take this drug and I might die today because some asshole made this drug and it could kill me today. Like, I never played Russian roulette, thank God, and I don't understand the drive. If someone told me, hey, if you shoot up, you might get high or you could die at the same time. You know what I'm going to go? I'm just not going to die. How about we just don't, I don't understand it, but I don't have to because I never related to that in the first place.
Right.
But I promise you that if the worst thing you're doing is weed, but you have a functioning life and you're a happy person, then what's the difference, man? And this comes from a dude who's been straight edge 25 years.
Well, that's exactly my point. And after I kind of left that realm, I still applied those principles that I learned, developing a relationship with God, continuing to do that through prayer and meditation, right? Like not being a dickhead to people and apologizing pretty much as quickly as I can right away, like trying to continually take an inventory of self and be a better individual. I realized, I don't need a program to do that. And I found those same communities in things like jiu-jitsu, which... it's funny you talked about your jaw broken. I actually also have had my jaw broken. The old mouth wired shut. Took a size 12 Timberland steel toe to the mouth. And that just the whole from here to here is not real bone.
Can't see
all bone plate.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the button, dude, and And I'll tell you what, the first time I ever shot up, that's immediately the first thing I thought about was like, dang, the button. It was the exact same thing, and I was just in the right state of like, it's funny because actually what got me hooked on pills in the first place was jiu-jitsu. I broke my arm doing some dumbass white belt shit, like snapped it and dude, it was crazy. And, I got, doctor was giving me pills. I was still in pain, started getting my own pills. And then that progressed to, somebody couldn't get pills, got dope, stopped sniffing it. One of my buddies was shooting it, fell down the rabbit hole. And then it's crazy because like one of the main things that I utilize in my program of wellness is jiu-jitsu today. In the pandemic.
So when you started jiu-jitsu, when did you start doing jiu-jitsu? What year?
So I initially, this is back in like 2006. And then after I broke my arm, I stopped.
Time out. So my guy, Jarrett Wiener, he was Steve Maxwell, the original Maxercise gym in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
That guy who's been on Rogan a million times. So my guy Jarrett Wiener was doing jiu-jitsu back in the 90s. And I remember one time we all went to his jiu-jitsu academy once he opened it, which is like right around 2004, 2005. And he had a small little gym, like not like the way they are now. It was sweaty.
Right.
And he was like, you guys should try this. And we're like, fuck no. And I think about my life now, because that was right when I was getting online with This Is Hardcore just happened in 2006. I just started my union job. And I thought about it like, man, if I would have started jiu-jitsu at the same time, a lot of things would have squared away sooner for me because of that regimen of training, which now I've lost. I've been injured. It's fucked up. In 2020, I broke my hand at FYA, trained just doing the drills, didn't roll.
Mm-hmm.
And consistently, I've hurt myself with less stuff and not had that same fervent, because I'm like, man, I'm worried about getting fucked up. I don't want to go back to work and be fucked up again. And so like my activity was strong. In the last 2 years, my entire activity is so much weaker because I'm getting older and I'm not able to make either a schedule. We do a lot with the podcast, a lot of shows, a lot of other things, and then also like the oh yeah, I bone spur from work, or oh I did this, or oh I work late in the wintertime and we do a lot of overtime in the spring and summer, and I miss it so much. And the only reason I asked you is there was some Hard Carl's one of my best friends in the world, Jinx Proof. He started Jinx Proof. He has saved himself from all the stuff we talked about by moving to Philadelphia. And this is, he eventually going to come on my podcast and we'll talk a lot about his struggles, but I don't want to tell his whole thing. But he saved his life moving to Philadelphia and starting jiu-jitsu in 2018. He goes 3, 4, 5 times a week. He's at Tap Out for Cancer beating guys 20 years younger than him. And he's clean, sober, and a fucking purple belt in 6 fucking years because he just goes after it, man. And
Yeah.
I for people who are listening, who are jiu-jitsu heads, who maybe they have some of the struggles, I've personally seen someone dedicate their life to jiu-jitsu to keep them demons out, and it's like such a powerful force, man.
Well, and for me especially, outside, the physical benefits, um, my brain is fucking nutty. And when you're doing jujitsu, it's an hour where you're not thinking about shit that's
Mm-hmm.
going on in the rest of the world, all the stress and strain of kids and bills and shit that you see on your fucking phone. It's like all I got to worry about is not letting this motherfucker choke me out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. And, that's an energy that I used to get out at a hardcore show, fucking spin kicking like a damn ninja.
Hell
This is
yeah.
where I get to be a ninja now, and it's,
What are you a 10 planet head, or you just like the Nogi stuff?
no, so I'm actually, I would say I prefer probably the gi. I have been doing a lot of no gi lately, but just that's because some of the coaches that I like primarily teach no-gi where I train at, so I just go to their classes. And I like kind of the freedom of movement, and playing with fucking around with the legs. But I just like being able to control somebody with a gi, wrap them up with their own shit, or like choke them with their lapel. And um, I mean, it's created some of the best relationship. Like the majority of the people I interact with now are all people from jiu-jitsu. I'm actually working on opening an outpatient recovery center. Um, and my business partner, my main business partner, is a guy that I've trained with, the last 4 years, and my kids play with his kids, and we just align on so many things, and we're looking to get that shit open within the next year. All pretty much based off an idea that got sparked me. I listen to a bunch of personal development podcasts outside of the This Is Hardcore podcast. And I heard a dude talking about making money with recovery houses. And so I kind of was like thinking about it and like, I need to stop letting the fact that I smoke weed be a deterrent for me doing the things that I do and helping others. And, I went on a 24-hour hike where it was 24 hours straight, continuous movement. If you sat down, that was considered quitting, through the mountains in Georgia. And I tore my MCL doing jiu-jitsu like a week and a half before. And so like I did as much like running, because like basically like forward and backward movement was cool, but like anything like lateral, like I couldn't train jiu-jitsu, but I was like running and trying to do like some leg exercises to strengthen around it. But I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to hobble in the mountains, and I got there, and that was way more difficult than I had anticipated, because I'm like, well, it's so fucking, we're walking around for 24 hours, how bad can it be? And honestly, it was like probably the hardest thing that I've done outside of getting clean. And all I could think of on the drive back from Georgia was that's the epitome of getting and staying clean, just making it through 24 hours, not quitting. Told my man, And over the last like year, we've been working on this plan and the way it's been evolving and how we're getting this program. But yeah, I mean, there will be some focus around the steps and all that shit, but there's also going to be a large focus on, applying these principles, finding physical hard shit to put yourself through, to remember that you're not just some little fucking piece of shit junkie, and are capable of much greater,
Well,
you
like,
know?
so physical exertion is really the fear. But it's also like a superpower. Like once you realize what you can get through, like I
Mhm.
remember, I'm still a lowly blue belt because of my falling off.
Right, right, right.
I'll probably be a blue belt for another 28 years, but my uptick to continue. But the 3 5 minute rolls that became, fuck, we're going to the Saturday class where it's 5 6 minute rolls, and like
Right.
at first you're like, oh man, but then once you're a year into hitting that I work a lot of Saturdays. I make a lot of money on Saturdays. So I much I love a Saturday jiu-jitsu, I've never turned it down if I have work. Unless it
Right.
was like, hey, this is team day and that's the day people get their belts a lot of times in the old way they used to do at the school. And
Mhm.
so Saturday was the Jared Weiner. Everybody shows up, and we're saying like our class our school one time when Jared was still owner. When I tell you it was regular for 14 black belts to be sitting there across on Saturday, and you're just staring at killers, and then they'd be like, white and blue belt, go in the back room, and you're like, all
Yeah.
right, but like that was like the dojo moment, and there was like you'd hear Jared, I hear talking back there, I don't hear rolling. There's this drive to get better through persistence and per pushing. And no one was ever told, "Hey, you're hurt, keep going." In fact, everyone was like, "Hey, if you can't do it, we understand, but push yourself." And one of the great things is I hit doing jiu-jitsu at 38, and I'm not where I want to be with jiu-jitsu, but I'm a lot better with where my health is because of it. My mental sanity, that 1 hour of just having that time is so cool, and I miss a lot of it. I gotta make it I gotta prioritize and make it happen because I do miss it so much. And in the same breath, I know that there's got to be some endorphin release that gives you some reward for all of that. I mean, I just looked at your school that you go to, and you're rolling with straight up South American bros. You're going, yeah, them
Dude,
dudes, they are not fucking around in that school, baby. I
so
just looked.
my
I had a look. I was like, I remember looking at your. I looked at your profile the other day. I'm like, oh, but and I was like, oh wait, what school is this? And then I'm like, you see all the Portuguese. You're like, uh oh, these motherfuckers
yeah.
they ain't fucking around, bro.
So my professor is a fifth degree black belt directly
I just
under
saw.
Professor De La Hiva. I mean, I went to his class last night, and so basically, when at the beginning of the pandemic, my kid's mom was pregnant with our third, and her and I really got into it, and she left out like March of 2020. And so like we were figuring out some custody shit, and so like the time that I didn't have my kids, I was in the gym. I was training twice a day. Plus, I would get private lessons from a black belt, like twice a week. He would let me trade him some weed for some lessons, and then I'd go to his class, and so he would give me like extra pointers in his class. And so my learning curve was real quick. Like I got my blue belt in about a year and a half, and
Same, same.
and just like I got my purple belt like another year and a half later. So I've been a purple belt almost 2 years now. And it was just because I was training 7 days a week, twice a
God
day, probably
bless.
4 days a week,
Hard. I
and
love that. Never did
dude,
it, but I.
yeah. And so
That's
like,
awesome.
and so I was just always around, and the gym has a lot of black belts, so that I was a good test dummy, and because I'm aggressive and I just wanted to learn and keep growing, and so like now when I go there, the only people I get to roll with because they like match you up. When I go to VJ's class, he's old school, man. He likes to match people up. You go with this guy, you go with that guy. He only puts me against black belts. So I'm like, I go in there and, I train up here in York where I'm at. I live in Pennsylvania now. So I only go down there maybe like once a week or once every other week. But up here, I train, almost every day. And my kids train with me, 3 to 5 times a week. depending on if I have them or if they're at their mom's. And I'm like I'm like a big fish in a small pond up here. So like I have a totally different role up here. I'm like teaching a lot of white and blue belts shit, and like I have people that I get my tough roles from, but it's like when I go down there, it's a humbling experience, because it's like competitive black belts, guys that will just want to fuck you up.
Dude, I saw the medals, I saw all the pictures from the stand. I went, oh, these boys are real. The thing about jiu-jitsu too that people may not get is like exactly that. Like you are going hard in the jiu-jitsu, so you now can impart this to other people. Everything I have ever done, whether it was cabinet making and show booking and booking tours and concrete stuff, the better you are at doing something, you will only get more refined teaching someone else. Now, I've never been good at teaching anybody anything in jiu-jitsu because I feel like I know nothing. I still feel like I know nothing, but at the same time, I had the opportunity like years ago with like Kevin Hare, who's now a purple belt, my boy. I brought an extra gi. They were all at the house. We threw a gi on some people. We were rolling around and just showing them they were ever getting into jiu-jitsu. But it was funny thinking about this. Like you get better by teaching others because now you're re-examining what you think to do from someone else doing it. Like, and when you're in the process of explaining it, and like whether it's physical shit like the troweling of concrete or the way we do a form work. Every time you teach somebody, you're putting your eye back on it, and I'm always going, "Is that the right way?" I never go, well, "This has to be the right way." I'm like, I'm always trying to refine, and I think jiu-jitsu over time gives you that refinement because you're constantly at your level specifically. You're at the point where people want you to teach somebody something because you've gotten to that thing. The pool I can imagine in York, PA, being much different than in Baltimore. But it gives you more opportunity to the leeway because you're going to get caught by somebody you wouldn't expect, right? But
for sure.
If you go down to Baltimore on one of them Saturdays, woo, you better not be playing that easy shit there. They'll get you.
Yeah, exactly. And I related a lot to like skateboarding. I was a big skateboarder growing up, and it's like it's an individual thing. You're around your homies, but like at the end of the day, you're the one doing the tricks over here and whatever. And with jiu-jitsu, there's so much of that same type of energy and like vibe to it. You have to think like, hey, oh, how do you do that? And you just spoke on it. It forces you to think about like, oh, well, I do it. Like it forces you to think about something that you just do as a reaction because you've been doing it so long that's just how you do it. And you have to stop and say, oh, this guy doesn't know shit and his perspective is totally different. I need to, I do it this way because of this. Or you might find something better by doing it, having to break it down. And it's
you just said skateboarding. Jarrett Weiner, before he found jiu-jitsu, he was literally skateboarding by somebody and he skated by Maxercise, and that started him off. And a lot of my friends who were in the mid-90s, really heavy into skateboarding, they'd all kind of found their way to jiu-jitsu, not only just because it just happened to be like, oh, this is the thing here. It was one of the only schools in the East Coast at the time for it. But it has that development of, oh, this is how you do this move. Well, how does my body do this move? How does my physical weight, like, anything that involves going over your neck and like the 10 planet shit, I call space jiu-jitsu. If I'm upside down, I literally go, oh, here we go. We're going to, because Tom, when Tom is a really great professor and he's now the owner of the school. Tom is really involved in teaching us not only the traditional stuff, but like we learn the truck. I'm not good at it, but we learn. Yeah. My friend Matt Dempsey, who was in Horror Show, the band Horror Show, he owns 10 Planet Ventura, California. He's
no shit.
Dude got his black belt. Just got his first degree. His first degree black belt from Eddie Bravo.
From Eddie. Dude, like I need Eddie on my podcast.
I might be able to. Let me see if I can't.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Let me see.
Dude,
what the deal is
I listen to Eddie
another
heavy.
guy Another guy that came up in hardcore who was a skateboarder, hardcore Philly dude, involved in everything. He now owns, I think it's 10 Planet Pompeo in Florida. Like a lot of my guys went to 10 Planet because of the versatility, the ability
Yeah.
to like. It's a little bit more free than the more old school BJJ style. But I noticed I have yet to really be in the time where jiu-jitsu went from being like, yeah, we do the gi and there's a no gi class where because of Pennsylvania there's nothing but fucking wrestlers. I
Yep.
had I had no ability to deal with a 25-year-old wrestler at almost 40.
Right.
And nowadays the way that it is, it's like Carl's like, dude, you got to come back steady. It's gotten easier, and it's like I don't think jiu-jitsu's ever easier, but thank you for tricking me. But I think that there's a creativity that you can expand on something in something more versatile. Like, yeah, you might be able to, like, we all have different body types. Now, thankfully, when I started jiu-jitsu, I was heavy as fuck. I was
Yeah.
like 280. I'm down to my 230s, but I'm 6 foot, so I'm probably heavier than you, I imagine.
Yeah. I'm 6 foot. I'm like 185, 190.
Yeah, yeah. So I got like fucking 40 pounds on you. So I'm not gonna be able to move the same way you'll be able to move, but I might have a longer leg. I might have different things. So everybody has this little bit of versatility, and I think it kind of makes everybody's game. Once they find what they can work with, they can find their game in that, and that's one of the few things. Like for a long time, I was involved in this SCA thing, which is medievalism, and it was like we're using rattan swords and we're making armor, and your body type and your speed of your hands, also like aesthetically, like hey, if you want to dress this sort of way and wear this kind of armor, you're gonna have to figure out how to fight around your armor or the look, and it's really interesting that the versatility and the creativity comes from like simple decisions. And I think jiu-jitsu does that. And to some smaller extent, the SCA stuff did that. The SCA was much less formal. It's more like a ad hoc. This is how I do it, and then you practice and you learn.
Yeah.
But you don't have like there are dudes that would be at like a black belt level, and this shit's been going on for a long time here. There's guys, but them guys are now the very old guys.
Hmm.
And I find the parallels to that. But with hardcore, yeah, we all go through our time when we're like the kid in the pit. You don't want to see me out in the pit, not because I'm a ninja and I'll kill you all. It's because you're like, what's this old man doing out here? Plus
Right.
if I'm in the pit, it's like the end of the Step Brothers video where they go in the movie when they go into the schoolyard to kick these little kids. I ain't going on to kick the little kids, man. So like, you ain't gonna see me out there as much because these are just little kids
Right.
now. It's like there's a couple of girls who
if
are
I'm
like legitimately 17, 18 that are moshing now in Philly. What am I gonna do? Kick one of them in the middle of the chest? Like, man, I can't be doing that shit.
I mean, to be fair, I remember probably 2006 or 7 being at KC's down in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It was like a Halloween show, and they would throw these all day shows. It'd be like 20 bands. And I think, I want to say maybe like Acacia Strain was headlining. Somebody threw a chair right at this girl and knocked her teeth out. I mean,
That was the
it was,
2000s.
you
That was
know,
the 2000s. We don't have that no more because of TikTok.
100%, bro. And
I just like blaming TikTok. I don't actually mean it. I just like talking shit.
yes, but what I was going to say too, to touch on the versatility piece and how things change on body type, right? To make the skateboarding parallel again, it's like I can do a kickflip, but a kickflip on standing still versus a kickflip moving versus a kickflip going downstairs, your foot position is different, your how you're flicking it is different, and it's just like when you're rolling with somebody, every arm bar in a roll is going to be different. Yeah, the concept is the same, but the actual execution of it in that moment is going to be different.
Yeah,
And it's like no matter what, based on somebody's body type, no two rolls are the same ever.
never,
You know,
never.
So
Unless you're the white belt death match. Like when we first started, like we were still like, hey,
yeah.
they would like, we don't want you guys. We would start on our knees, which I still think is the worst thing ever. And I remember that's how I started getting good with. Not that I ever was good, but that's when I started getting acclimated to butterfly guard. because I got tired of being on my knees after troweling on
Yes.
concrete. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit on my ass and start trying to get those butterfly hooks in.
Well, and that's the cool thing too. Like when I got my purple belt, and then that was like right when I got my purple belt is when I really started training at York, like pretty much all the time. I was up here, and it was like it was a really hard thing, and I actually still, if I get any promotions, they'll give them to me down there. VJ will give them to me. I don't do it at York. Um, Not that I have anything against them, but I started that journey with them. If they want
Nah,
to put some
it's
more belts on me, you know,
that's the old school respect of it. Like
and I just that's where my belief is in it. And so I got my purple belt and just really had to. Another black belt that I trained with, he like messaged me and we were talking about it. He was like, "Look, I've had to train at other gyms, and it's not the same people or your brothers that you've put all this time in with." He was like, "But you got to find ways to make your training your own and adapt." And I really kind of opened it up a little bit more because training with VJ, he has a certain style, and everyone at that gym has a certain style. I come up here, everyone's playing a totally different game, and they don't even touch the stuff that I played. So I've gotten to really grow as a jiu-jitsu player playing butterfly shit. I had no butterfly game, no X guard game, and they do a lot more old school kind of shit up here. So I've been having fun playing around with different shit, and I mean, it's a blast, man.
are they still smash and pass? Do we still got the? Do we
Oh,
still got?
over under, baby.
We got. I got lucky that Wilson Heath was in our was a big part of TAC team, and he would come in smallest dude, and I remember seeing him like show the Wilson pass, the side follow pass, and watching little
Mm-hmm.
Wilson do it. You're like this motherfucker has his own pass named after him, man. It's
Dude,
awesome when you see that. But that's the thing is like we came into it grinding, like every shoulder in your face, push like like Jarrett who's obviously JT Torres is like real big in jiu-jitsu now, but JT still smashes and passes and everything, even no gi. Fucking knee cut, smash, pass. That's the stuff that we came under, and it
it's
makes it
effective.
hard. It makes it hard to do like 6 5-minute rolls. I mean, it's because you're gonna get it. 6 minute rolls rather. Like
Yeah.
that smash, that suffocation moves. Like then baseball bat chokes. All that shit was like, man, this jujitsu is fucking mean. And now I watch it, and I should probably play more jiu-jitsu and watch less of it on the internet. Because I look at it and I go, this guy's upside down and just did something I've never seen before. And I can't mimic. I can't mimic. Like I physically, if you showed me something, I
Yeah.
would go, do it to me because I can't tell. I can't physically, whether it was in the sword, like hey, you move your arm and you do this. No, I physically have to I have to kinetically operate and understand the motion that I'm doing. I can't mimic. It's like
Right. Got it.
it's just so it's a hard lesson. But I think that the dude like jiu-jitsu obviously got bigger in general, but hardcore was the underground for a lot of it, and like the people in our grounds. But like now today, like Jake, who's in the band Plague Clinic, he runs a school out in Pittsburgh. Like
Right.
there's all this access to jiu-jitsu that my point is people in hardcore who don't realize how close it is. I mean, even you're in that school, but Rob from Ruiner, he's got his own school, Baltimore
Dude, I know.
BJJ.
Do
Yeah.
you know how crazy it is to me when I went to just randomly, a buddy of mine was like, "Yo, come to this open mat at Baltimore BJJ," and I walk in and it's Rob from Ruiner. Like specifically remember going to a ton of Ruiner shows back in the day, seeing him stomping around. If he wasn't playing a show, he was at the show. I mean, that dude was a little pit bully, dude.
Dude, well, he was a wrestler.
Like
I did an early podcast with him, and we talked
I
a
know,
lot
I
about
listened
wrestling.
to it.
And he
Yeah.
really she's in with the guys from Balance from Philadelphia, which is like
Right, right.
the one
It's
of the
like
other
Christian
big
Woodmansey.
No, Christian is he's under Otto stuff. He opened his
Oh,
own
okay.
school. Christian came up to our school a bunch, but he opened up a school. I don't know if he still has it. I know he
Oh, is
opened up
it
a school.
Logic? Is that what he did?
Yeah, he did Logic, and it just happened to
Logic.
be COVID and the Otto stuff. But He's Rob is associated with Balance Jiu-Jitsu, which is incredible. A lot of my like real tight homies, just by chance of like, you're gonna go to the school that's closest to you. Like, I live 3 blocks walking distance to the Fishtown school when I wasn't training, but because I was friends with Jared, who has tag team, if I would have showed up at a hardcore show with the Balance, he would have gave me the what are we doing? Come on. So when I started jiu-jitsu, I was living up here, and it's an easier drive to our school. You know, like was once BJJ United, which is now United Grappling Arts, and it's out just outside of Philadelphia, and all of our friends basically just go by what's closest. You know, like, so some of my guys, they're straight Balance dudes, and they're fucking killing it. And it's great because we see each other like, all right, you know, like we hang out, you know, every weekend. And they go to Balance, we're in this. There's a lot of cool shit that's parallel to hardcore. Plus, the problem with getting older in hardcore is you lose activity. Like, unless you're in a band, like I book shows, I do flyers, we book tours, I'm in bands. Jiu-jitsu, you still get the play, like you get the play part, like that in the pit, like, you know, like, yeah, we're getting older, but we still got it, you know, like,
yeah.
And I try to encourage, and I have encouraged many people to go to, like, another Balance example was Keith, who sings for the band Conduit from New Jersey. He was talking to me at FYA. I was showing him moves, and like, this is the kind of like a basic idea. Like, if you're worried about it, this is what it is. And he's like, what school should I go to? I didn't say come to my school. He lives in Jersey. So I sent him to one of the Balance schools that one of my guys runs. He's a fucking great guy, a great instructor. And Keith is like trying to be a competitive BJJ guy, and he loves it. And there's tons of our friends like that now that we meet from hardcore. We don't go to my school. We go to the school closest to you so you kick ass, you know?
Well, and it's so funny, you know, actually I was just thinking about it. You know who it is? It's a guy in the hardcore scene that actually originally got me into jiu-jitsu because he was doing it, was Kenny Savercool. I'm not sure
I know him.
Yeah, best photographer in hardcore. But, you know, he trained down at 50-50 for a long time. And, you know, that was how I had initially gotten into it. But I think about now where things are at. You have OGs in hardcore like Harley Flanagan. You know, I mean, that guy is wild as hell. And he's another one, had a hard life. You know, jiu-jitsu is helpful to people who come from these fucked up backgrounds.
You know, the guy Matt Serra from UFC?
Yeah.
The UFC podcast? There's an episode where Matt Serra and Henzo are talking about Henzo going to the UFC. And he's like, yeah, I've got this Hoya from Madball. I show him this move. And he said, that's bullshit. It'll never work. He's like, I pull the move off and I show up to the class next time. I go, what is bullshit now? Hoya and a bunch of the OG DMS guys, when they opened the Henzo school, they were early trainers. Like, they're literally not trainers. They were early, like, like Henzo knows, like, by name to drop on the podcast, like, all them guys. And just, yeah, Hoya happened to be right there when Henzo opened. You know, like, you're right there in the heart of what would be one of the biggest schools known in the world for jiu-jitsu at one point at its opening thing. Like, Henzo opened a satellite school in Philly, but it was a block and a half or two from the school that Jarrett and all that went to, which would be what came from Maxercise would be like the Balance schools, the tag team schools, all the schools in our general tri-state. A lot of them started by going to Maxercise back in the mid-90s. So you have this thing where hardcore even like kind of like runs simultaneous in the 90s with BJJ, you know, like it's in Philly, it's in New York, all these people start finding it, they start training it, you know, like, and I've hung out with Harley quite a bit. We've booked him quite a bit in the last couple of years, and he's legit. And, you know, I don't think there's a lot of guys who, like the guy Ed O'Neill from Married with Children.
Yeah.
He's a black belt and he's got tons of privates. So yeah, he's gonna eventually know the moves enough to be a black belt. But like,
right.
I don't see Henzo letting Harley Flanagan be a black belt with the Henzo name without having to grind in her. I mean, the biggest voice from hardcore in jiu-jitsu is Jocko Willink, and Jocko's been in, you know, like another guy. that OG hardcore dude, OG jiu-jitsu guy. And I think a lot of this aligns up because as you do get to a point where it's not boring. You still love the culture. I still love everything about it, but we become spectators more than the guy up front. Yeah, there might be a show or two you might see me stage dive, but when I was 280, I ain't stage diving too much. Like I still like to get up with the bands. I still love watching the bands. I love listening to new bands. But it's in jiu-jitsu where we get the focus on ourselves. And I think that's why so many people, as you get older, or even when you're just young, I mean, not everybody's what the kids call it main character syndrome. Not everybody wants to be the killer in the pit,
Right,
so this
right.
jiu-jitsu allows you to be the main character and you get to do what you want to do. And you go to hardcore, you go
Hell
to your
yes.
show, like there's some self-affirming things that come from the progress of jiu-jitsu too. Because I used to not be able to stretch. For me, at the beginning, it was stretching. Now I got the stretching. Oh, I can't get this move. I can't get this move. And now you can get this move. Then it's like you have your training partners. Oh, I finally timed when he did this. Like these little iterative
Yes.
things, they build our confidence. I know this became almost like a jujitsu podcast in itself, but like
I'm all good.
there's so many building blocks that make jujitsu super important to people in every aspect. And I think if I was trying to build my self-esteem up and try to stay clean, I wouldn't see another reason why besides it's constantly this. Why my guys who do it, like I said, Hard Carl, the greatest example of like a dude who's clean, sober, competing at 54 years old, going to do these things and doing it well, going against guys 20 years younger than them every fucking week. It's, that it shows you that there's still life to be progressed, even in the later stages of life. This thing gives you those opportunities, and it's very rare to do that. You wouldn't find somebody at 54 starting a new band and going
Right,
on a U.S. tour. You wouldn't see that. And so
right.
it's a real power, man.
Well, and that is like a really good point when you think about just all the little things and the elements of it that you have to kind of learn. And as you progress in jiu-jitsu, you realize it's like, about being patient. You start having, like, for me, obviously it just became a point where everything is jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not just about the moves being done on a mat, right? It's how are we living, right? Are
Yeah.
we looking for these incremental progresses? Are we recognizing these things? It's no different than when I would go to an NA meeting, right? I get the same kind of conversation in the jiu-jitsu locker room as I got at an NA meeting, right? I have conversations on the mats for ranging from all elements, whether that's government conspiracy to spirituality and God and what's going on at home, relationship issues, or giving someone else an ear. It's like you get all of these things, the type of love, support, community, and obviously every community is going to have fucked up people. It's like, but we find this comfort in being able to get it hits a lot of boxes for guys like us.
It's a saving grace too, and it's a time your brain gets to escape. There's endorphin rushes, like there's so much to it. And you almost feel like you're like a Mormon on some dude's doorstep trying to sell him on jujitsu. But once you're there, it's the truth. Like once you're there,
100%.
and you once you're there and you see it, I mean, and I feel like a poser because it's like I haven't been able to do as much. But these little obstacles that I've allowed to be bigger obstacles that I had to remain and go back and make the time and make the thing. But that brings me back to a time of discipline. Hey, I've got this amount of window to do this amount of things, and despite all the stuff we've been putting on our plates lately, I still need time for it. And actually, like, when you say something, you put in action, like this conversation, it's gotten me even more ramped up to like, all right, let this ankle get back to where, and I keep saying, like, when I get this injury done, I'm going to be back. But it's like, no, like, I got to get the ball rolling because when this stuff happens, it's when I feel more in sync with myself, like the first couple weeks, yeah, you're a little bit more sore, but you're going to go to bed early and you're going to eat a lot before you go to bed. Do you think do you think without jujitsu you would have been able to hold on to sobriety or to stay clean?
Yeah, yeah. So, when I really made a commitment to myself. So, like, when I first so I got like arrested, and I knew I was gonna have to like make it. Like, I went to jail for like a month, and I felt really fucked up because I felt better in there than I did out in the world. and I actually had to detox. I had MRSA. They were talking about cutting my arm off. I was in a medical.
Was it the injection site was the issue?
No, so well, yeah. I mean, there was just being a dirty junkie, not showering for days on end, fucking playing around with needles. You get all these random open scabs, and I just had one like on my arm, and I got like a little chunk missing out of there right in here. I actually got a tattoo of a needle right next to it because even when I had this black scab about this big, I was still shooting up right next to it, and I got arrested. They threw me in an isolated medical unit. I had to detox in that with no medication, and like my bail wasn't even that high. Nobody was trying to bail me out. Everybody was like, we think this is the best place for you. And they were right, in that moment. And, I ended up letting this girl bail me out. And it was Mother's Day 2011. I went over to my mom's house for dinner, and I was going to treatment the next day on that Monday, and like the next day I didn't even use. I was like, I'm gonna do every single thing they tell me to do for 6 months, and if shit doesn't get better, I'm fucking gonna kill myself with dope, And like when I tell you things got better drastically immediately, uh, like I am not lying. I mean, I was like a dog off a leash. I was running wild, skateboarding, playing music, like making art, like hanging out. I mean, honestly, the first year it was, I stayed clean from spite and pussy were probably the two biggest things. There was like this one particular moment, and I still think about it today. I was at a friend's funeral, and I was shooting dope in the bathroom. They let the funeral lets out. We're all just like, everybody's outside smoking cigs, whatever. And I'm standing there and I hear this girl, oh, I bet Elliot will be next. And I turned around and I was like, what did you just say? She was like, oh my God, I didn't realize you were standing right behind me. I didn't mean it like that. And I was like, there's really only one way to mean that. And so literally for that first year, especially every day that I wanted to get high, I said,
Thought about that chick.
it ain't going to be me. Not today, motherfucker. I'm going to go post something on Facebook, let you know I'm still alive. Like, about a year clean, I had made kind of some messes in my life, and I'm like, oh, it's not just the drugs. I need to really buckle down and discipline myself and like dive into shit, And I did a lot of therapy, with the outpatient program I was in. I did like their therapy program too. It was like a year program. It wasn't like
Was it the Recovery of America or one of them?
No. So it was through the rehab that I went to. I went to an inpatient. They had an outpatient program, and like it was like a step down program, and they also had a therapy program with it. That was part of my probation. I had to complete all that, and after, like I said, I started working for Zoomies and became a store manager from like a seasonal guy in like a year and a half, and just like thought I was going to be a Zoomies lifer. Worked for them for about 5 years, left, went to Levi's for a couple years, and then really dove right when my first kid was born, dove into the DC legal-ish weed market. And and we had like a shop down in DC. We were doing events, and there was a lot of ups and downs with that. And, we had a spot in Baltimore that was cool. It was the old Hells Angels clubhouse. And, now I've like really become just like piecing things together. Like ever since I moved to York, it's like the weed shit isn't really a factor in my life anymore. It's like, I've started a landscaping company for what that is, a solar panel cleaning company. I'm working on this other shit. I pretty much am a dad, and then I do whatever I can to make some bucks here and there to try to hustle it up, and working towards like I heard like a story one time where it was like a kid keeps trying to get his dad to play catch with him, and the dad's like, oh, I'm busy right now, I'm busy right now, I'm busy right now. The kid's like, come on, Dad, I'm trying to play catch. Dad tears this picture of the earth out of a magazine, tears it up into a bunch of pieces, gives it to his son, says, put that together, like a puzzle. When you put it together, we'll go play catch. Less than 5 minutes later, comes right back. He said, well, how'd you do that? He was like, well, on the back of the picture was a picture of a man. I put the man together and the world came into place. And so that's kind of the philosophy I've been living by, and trying to better myself and understand that my next phase of life in this recovery realm is going to require me to be somebody that I've never been and really leading these people. And after 13 years, it's like I feel like it would be easy for someone to say, oh, well, what have you done lately? You don't remember what it feels like. And it's like, motherfucker, I put myself through suffering every day because I can't forget where I come from.
That's the nature of. I mean, if the Buddhists have anything to say, they'll say that life is suffering. You know, like, and it's what's fucked up is that I don't think every path has to be individualized, and I think that you can teach somebody or tell somebody what you've done, but they have to walk and do the things. So if what you're doing's working, and honestly, like, the biggest problem I have in the Philadelphia area is there's so many people that do side work of all sorts of kind for so cheap and so low that it's not, when I say it's not worth the physical time, people have gotten used to taking advantage of people who can't have a real job to eliminate, like, hey, like, you gotta, I mean, I already have a normal day job. I'm not coming out here trying to make $4,000 on 4 hours worth of work. But
right.
From 20 years ago to 10 years ago, and even the last 5, it's so much people just doing shit at the cheapest volume, at the cheapest, just to make a little bit of money, that it's not even, like, I promise you, I got a good group of friends. We all pour, like, I make less money than I had 20 years ago because we were all ripping and rolling and side jobbing. But there's people out there that lowball it so bad that I don't even understand where any profit's made. And not like, hey, you paid me for your time. It's a time, and then did we make money for it?
Right.
Whereas, like, I tried my hand 12 years ago at trying to run a business in that world, and I couldn't compete with the lower, cheaper labor. And I just, like, you know what? I'm gonna focus on union shit. It's not gonna be my, like, I realized, like, just getting up and working every day, I'll make more money aggregate over time than chasing these jobs that you get there and the guy says, yeah, we want to do it. And then you show up day one. They're like, listen, I got a guy who can do it. I'm like, dude, you just wasted my time. And you hear that same song every time. Oh, well, there's a guy now that wants to do it cheaper. Okay, cool. Don't waste my fucking time. And it's one thing I miss is the opportunity to make an extra couple little bucks because of how cheap the whole thing's going. So sometimes you have to diversify. I love the idea of having different shit to do. Like, I get bored, It's like Jiu-Jitsu fills it up. My girl is a professional cosplayer, so I spend time helping her craft, and we do pictures out of, we do the things that we got to do, and it cracks me up because it's like half of the room is an office, and it's where we do the podcast and where we book shows, and she makes the laminates for the fest and all this other stuff here, and then we've got RGB lights and props and shit all the time. But it's the creative side of me loves taking an hour or two and doing these things and doing something fun, because the sitting on the couch flicking through the channels is never my deal. I hate sports. I hate sports unless I'm playing them. You want to play wiffle ball? Let's go. You want to do jiu-jitsu? Let's go. You want to play soccer? Let's go. Watch it? Nah, I ain't got no time for that.
No, hell no.
And I do enough on the computer with the show booking and all the other stuff, and then with the podcast, that, like, it's nice to get away from the computer stuff from time to time.
Well, and that's just since you're touching on it, that's, obviously, I know we kind of spoke a little bit before in the DMs about it, but that is one of the things that really I really wanted to get you on about was, how you conduct business in the hardcore scene, in music in general. I feel like you're somebody who handles your business like you obviously have your Mason job. You book one of the best hardcore festivals on the East Coast without a doubt for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
Some of the best bands in hardcore every year, you know, like, and, you throw old school church shows, you try to make sure bands are getting paid. It's like your priority is like really, it seems from my perspective as somebody who loves hardcore and really does it for the love of the game and to show others, and hopefully, others can get inspired by that and keep it going.
I booked my first hardcore show when I was 16, turning 17 in 1997. So, 18. I'll be and this March I'll be 18 years into booking hardcore shows. Actually, no, 28 years into booking hardcore, not 18. I'm at my 18th. This is hardcore this year. Next year will be 19 years of this hardcore. 2026 will be 20 years of this hardcore. I've been playing in bands since I was 15, 16. And I have friends who got in the game early, got in the game quick, made quick money. Then, as the business side caught up to the hardcore side, walked out of the game because they couldn't make as much money as they used to make. And I've never really been a profit businessman when it comes to this, when it comes to anything hardcore related. It just has to make sense. And I learned a lot of things from other people who were still better than me in the game. I got lucky with Sean Agnew from R5 Productions being like the first big mentor to kind of like close the gaps on how you're supposed to actually do offers on shows and the business side of things. A lot of it now comes from experience and just relationship building, that I have the relationships with certain bands and certain people, and I'm not really aggressive as far as profit margins. I don't think about that stuff. I'm not very aggressive, and I used to be a lot more petty and a lot more emotional. Like, I didn't get that show, I'm supposed to do the show.
Right.
I've now learned that I'd rather not do a show that I don't think is going to work financially. Even, not saying I can't make money on it, I don't want to do it. Like,
Right.
I don't even see, for the asking price and for the value of the band and the draw that'll come, a worthy endeavor to potentially lose. So I went from being, oh, well, it'll break even, to I just don't want to lose more than anything. And this last year was the worst year for This Is Hardcore attendance wise since 09. So I see a dip, and I'm not surprised by it. There's a lot more activity. We're not the only game in town, brother. And we have a legacy, but legacy only lasts for so long. And it's hard to keep up when there's newer stuff popping up all the time and you're the old guy on the block. That being said, the old guy still got a couple tricks in him. And I got the longevity that, we've taken our bumps and bruises and we get up, wipe the dirt off, and try again. This Is Hardcore, to me, right now I'm working on the outline that's going to be the oral history of 20 years of This Is Hardcore, where I don't really write so much, but the people who played, the people who saw, the people who did, they tell their stories. Because This Is Hardcore isn't my story. This Hardcore is their stories around something that we put on. That being said, I'm not the best business person because I grew up in an age where we were all like, hey, you win and lose. And a lot of changes have been made where bands who are celebrated as the greatest guys on earth and they love hardcore, it's a lot more money focused than anyone will ever project. And at the same time, some of the oldest, coolest bands are still the only ones who get it. And whether it's the bands in the last 5 years or the bands in the last 20 years, a lot of word fame goes into love. This is like all about. It's like, no, man. Like, let's get to the bottom of it. You don't want to have a regular job for the most part, so you tour, so you need to get paid. Even if your show loses money, you're still getting paid, and I have to lose money. So the balance is a couple, like 10 years ago, This Is Hardcore lost so much money that I was trying to jump off the Ben Franklin Bridge the Saturday night of it, and I actually got stopped. And I got stopped from actually killing myself. And so in the last 10 years, we've had a lot of successes that would come within 6 months after that happened. But I learned to let go of being the like I don't have to be the guy that does everything. And my guy Bob Wilson, he moved back up from Florida. Bob Wilson, Greg Falchetto, all Ben Stuckey, even Drayden, like all these guys are now doing shows in Philly, and it's means I don't have to do. I never did everything in Philly. Philly's always had a million venues, a million shows, a million this, but like the whole world doesn't need Joe Hardcore to do everything, and that's a good thing because then I'm not stuck. But it allows me to pick and choose and also make smart decisions because I didn't do. If I would do it all over again, there were so many decisions that would have affected me. I never ran my business for profit. I didn't learn everything. Like I'm still correcting mistakes from the past because I didn't go into hardcore with an MBA. The problem of today is everybody who is focused in hardcore went to college or know a lot more about business, and they come from a business world first. And it makes it very cut and dry. The problem with when you have a mathematical cut and dry is just the same problem you have with like a modern stock market. We are all unregulated to some degree of what the value really is. But my time, tenure, experience, I see some things and I have to go lower than the band wants. Well, then they're going to go somewhere else. Okay, go somewhere else.
Right.
I used to get emotional, and now I just go, cool, man. One less thing. I can't do the things to lose money to say I'm the one who did it. I've done that enough. I've booked a lot of the stuff. I think we're at almost 400 bands across 18 years of This Is Hardcore, not including all the bands I booked since 1997 that I've booked. I've booked enough of stuff that I don't have to hang my hat up, but I also don't have to brag about it. And if I don't want to do the show because it's a fiscal risk, then I'm not going to do it. I can't go back and change the business. Like when This Hardcore got bigger, I was like left on my own because Sean was involved in union transfer. Sean and I did the first 2006 to 2011. And he was the guy who handled the smart end of things, but I learned a lot from him. From 12 to 24, I've had to iteratively like learn from last year. What should we do better? What the budget? All this stuff. And in the last 12 years, hardcore shifted so much. You know that Cro-Mag's first show, when they came back, John Mackey and all them was in Philadelphia, like the Friday after Christmas, and when they got paid good money, and I think the show was $20. That show now they would want a $50 ticket for it. So we're 30 ticket in that time frame, 12 years, we're $30 more than what it would used to cost. And that has to be brought to bear by the younger people who are trying to go to 4 shows. Could you go to shows at 25 years old where you're paying $35 to $50 2-3 times a week? And that's what happened. That's what happened because everybody got greedy during this TikTok COVID era where everything sold out. And a lot of the shows this fall just recently didn't do as well. So I have a cousin who's really good who became good at finances. He's going to help rear the ship, show me what I should have done. I've never had a line of business credit. That's where I'm at. I've never done the white people business stuff. I've never done it. Right. Sorry, guys. It is what the fuck it is. And I'm not, I don't know if I've got 20 more, God willing, I have 20 more years on Earth. But I don't know what hardcore is going to be like in 20 years. So while I'm remaining and do it, we're going to do it smart. We're going to do it fair. If we lose, we lose. If we can come out even, that's great. My union job takes care of my bills. So I'm not worried about profit or buying a house from shows. I'm worried about hey, we got to break even here so we can stay solvent. And, maybe one day Philly hardcore shows passes down to somebody else if they want to take it. And, I don't think outside. I mean, Bob has his own shit. Greg is doing amazing shit with Takedown New Jersey. There's a lot of guys there. I don't think someone would need to take it over as much as if I step out, the void will be filled. So I'm not irreplaceable by any stretch. And I'm lucky that the younger guys still leave a space for the old man to do what I got to do. I'm very blessed that hardcore has given me that every major friendship in my actual life once I found shows, there's a couple guys from the old neighborhood that I tell stories about. Them guys are legendary. Some of them used to go to shows. Now none of them go to shows. Them guys I met organically as being a kid riding bike going through the neighborhood. The minute I started going to shows, every girlfriend I had, my girlfriend, my wife, we're in the middle of a very pleasant divorce, can't believe I said it on a podcast, and my future wife, I've all met through hardcore shows. Like everything I've done, I would never have been, I could have probably gotten a union. It would take me a little bit. I would end up being the carpenters, not the union cement masons, because I knew more carpenters and union cement masons in Philly. I was always going to end up in some kind of fucking union. But the guy who I met from CC's in Pennsylvania ended up being the guy that got me in the union. And everything has come from hardcore. All the wins, all the losses. I've never traveled until I was in my 30s for something recreational, because I did all my traveling with hardcore shows. All my tours, all my, one-offs, all my this and that was hardcore related. I didn't go on an actual me vacation until I think it was like 2010. But then the people we traveled to from hardcore. I don't have but with the exception of the SCA, Society for Creative Anarchism, when I was doing my little side quest and stretching my medievalism bug, I really didn't have a social order that didn't involve people from the neighborhood, people from the jobs that I worked that I knew. And I don't go out to bars after work. I go to the Christmas party for my union. Occasionally I go to the Christmas party for the company if I work for them around Christmas. But all my people are hardcore. My whole life is hardcore. My whole life is the people that I engage with. The social media now has kept us all tighter. And it's the people that I gravitate towards, the people that I can look at you and go, oh, trapped in a rice shirt, dude's got a face tattoo from Baltimore. I know this guy. I don't know you, but I know this guy. Why do I know this? Because we all walk those paths. And that's why I get upset when it's downplayed, the importance of the hardcore scene, the connectivity, synchronicity, or as Richie Crutch always shit talks me, serendipitous, because I say serendipitous a lot. But the general nature of this scene has given a plenty to everybody if it's there for them. Business-wise, yeah, I should have done better and did different things, but that wouldn't have been the organized, because then I would have done things in a way that organically wouldn't have flowed from my ideals or what I wanted to do. When I did my first show that was like 20 years of booking Joe Hardcore shows, I made $0 profit on a sold out show so I could have Cro-Mags and Judge and Wisdom and Chains at the church. What is a zero profit? It means money didn't go to me, but I got to celebrate 20 years with a show that had both Cro-Mags and Judge at the church. What is profit? What is profit? When you think of a word, what's profit? To me, it's extra money. Why do I need extra money where I'm celebrating 20 years of doing something? What is money?
Dude.
What is money? Like, what is money in the real thing? You can't be, if you're a fucking pirate, you might be able to be buried with it. But like today's, it's not even a cash world anymore. It's all on the internet. It's all taxed. It's all irrelevant almost. It's just what doesn't exist in the bank account or what went into the bank account that the government wants. So for me, I profit from having these relationships that still exist. I profit from the faith of the relationships that I've had for 25 years and going on now. Shit, I mean, I literally booked my first show since I was 17 years old. So now I'm at 27 years of some of these business relationships where like the band Overthrow came from Long Island to this shitty neighborhood. And we're talking about having Overthrow come back to that shitty neighborhood next year, 28 years after the first time they came out here. The guys, like, this is the stuff that, what is the value? What is the fiscal value of having friends for almost 30 years? What's the fiscal value of being able to say that 24 years after I joined Shattered Realm, we've got new music coming out. And my band Punishment this next year has 25 years since we started. What are the fiscal money? There's no. All that money is negative. If I count it loss versus win, I'm under. It was a losing business. But what did I lose? What's the lose? And that's the problem when you want, like, Yeah, your band will get paid profit. You'll get paid to play, and you can take all that money and it'll subside your living. But if your whole band's entire scope is if we don't come out of this with money, then it's not worth doing. Then you didn't profit anything. You lost. You
Right.
lost. And yeah, I've been in bands that have never been the hugest bands in the world. So we haven't seen these metric wins and this wage that allow you to live. But what is allowing you to live? Like my guy Craig, who's one of the greatest guys in the history of hardcore. Craig from Sick of It All played in Chromags with all these bands since he was a kid. Has one of the greatest storied, legendary things. Goes to play in Sick of It All, makes him a good living. But guess what? Dude just works a regular job and has side things and side hustles and just hustle. At Roger from Agnostic Front, yeah, he's the most legendary frontman in the history of hardcore. Has a side electrician business to keep the winter running. Like there's bands that broke up because they stopped making X amount of money a year. And yet Agnostic Front, Sick of It all these older bands figured out a way to make it work. I
Dude,
profited. I'm gonna say I profited in supporting my subculture and being supported by my subculture. I lost fiscal money that you can't take with you when you die. That's the wins or losses of hardcore for me. And I try to now get better with being not worried about tens of thousands of dollars in loss. I try to worry about, can I do this another 10 years? Give me 10 years. It'd be great to be the guy who goes, yeah, I've been booking hardcore shows for almost 40 years. It'd be nice to brag, but I might be too old for it, man. That's why I'm not a good businessman, because I could be sitting on a Scrooge McDuck pot of gold, but there wouldn't be people at my funeral to celebrate the life that I had. So if the money isn't in my pocket, but it goes to the bands, the money's not in my pockets, and I have to live in the hood because it doesn't work out right now, then that's what it is. But the people who work for profit, the people who are looking at what did I make? I made a lot of friends. I made life-changing situations happen for myself. I don't live like a normal person, but I still have a I'm a square job. A union guy's as square as it gets in this area, right? So I still have the balance of normalcy, but like I don't answer to anybody besides, oh, is this a job that's available to me right now? This is the company I'm working for. I work for a union where it's like, oh, that job's over. Let me get you on this fucking job. And I've been lucky that I run jobs at different levels throughout the year that gives me leadership and the ability to expand myself. I've just never been able to get myself in a side work company scenario where profit's there, because the profit margins are so small and low in concrete in itself. It's safer, longer. I get an actual retirement, actual benefits, actual health care, just being a union worker. Then fuck the union, I'm going to make my own way. And then, yeah, you might make a $20,000 job, and then you might not have another $20,000 for 4 fucking months. I'm not worried
right,
about that kind of stuff. And money's never really been the object for me because I never had it. I was
right.
on the welfare line since I can remember. And so like this thing's a blessing. To be on a podcast and talk about my life is a blessing. I'm a dude from neighborhoods people don't want to walk through, and yet I get asked to be a part of this. I was able to book shows in neighborhoods that people wouldn't walk through, and now I'm a part of something, which is This Is Hardcore and the Philly Hardcore shows, where we've expanded people's entire lives just by giving them the opportunity to be part of the subculture. And I'm more rich in value for that than anything else I could ask for.
I'm still stuck on the Judge show, the Joe Hardcore anniversary.
Yeah.
Um, these I think about how many iconic hardcore bands have come through Philly, man. It's always had a strong scene. You've been a key contributor to that. And like I said, I think it's because you reflect your values into your work, man. And for you, you are somebody that has been a creature of the culture he's helped create.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's so like this is like a win is saying, yo, remember that time Cro-Mags and Judge played back to back at the church and both got paid well and both were happy? Like in the last couple of years, that I have reinstilled my faith back to the church because we do a lot of tours. COVID coming, we did the biggest band in. I mean, I did Turnstile the year before COVID, and it was a shit show, literally a shit show. Some kid got hurt, and The I'm a medical tech told me, stop, he's hurt. We got to get an ambulance. I said, if I have to get an ambulance, everyone has to go, and the show stopped. The kid's knocked out. He's drunk. Get him upstairs. We can't move him. So I shut the whole show down at the end of their last song and kicked everybody out of the show because we put way too many people in the room for the fire ordinance. And everybody got mad, but it's like, hey, motherfucker, you're telling me what to do on my show. Fast forward, in the last 4 years, we did Youth of Today and Outburst together at the church. 2 shows in a row with Gorilla Biscuits at the fucking church. Earth Crisis played the church for the very first time. We've had so many key, my guy Zach says, roots bands. We've had, R5 just brought in, R5 Productions also does a great job of bringing shows, shit that we don't do. They just brought Infest to the church. You know, like the amount of bands that we have brought to the Philadelphia area to celebrate at a exciting DIY hall venue, new and old, is exhilarating because they could easily go to the club. They won't get double the money because it's a 500 something capacity. You know, like some bands definitely could draw 1,000 people and they chose to do the church. Some bands, this is the size room they're in. Right. But as long as I'm able to bring a show to the church and it's fiscally smart for us and we're not going to lose. And, you know, why there was no profit was because I know what the profit margin is. We're talking about business style. I said, oh, I've got this much if we sell out. Cool, let's spend all of the money so we sell out the room and we celebrate me doing 20 years. And I did it with a smile. And it was because why do I need the money when I just celebrated with Cro-Mags and Judge and I did this shit for 20 years? What's the value to this? What's the fifth? I'm going to take home money? No, we all went out to eat as friends and talked about we just did Cro-Mags and Judge at the church. And so that's the hardcore value and the memory that I'll live forever of doing. And, you know, good people in hardcore, you don't need to make 90% of the room to make a profit. You don't have to. You just have to be smart about it. And you have to let go because Live Nation and AEG are at everything. They're now buying stuff, and you just have to accept that some bands and some managers have a plan. And by the grace of time, I've seen every band go from their I'm blowing up phase to, hey, we want to do something smaller. Can you do something? You know, like, and you see that value return to the DIY show once the competitive nature of trying to be a full-time touring band is over. Now the band can go back to playing fun shows, get a couple scrotto in their pocket, but let's nothing crazy, and everybody walks out with a win. And now with the 27 years or so of doing this, I understand that. So if I don't get them, maybe I get them on their back dimer. When they want to do a small show for me. And because I grew up in an era where I had to home brew every show, get one band, book it around it, or just a bunch of friends bands, just book it around that all of our friends playing. I'm still able. My better shows aren't the tour packages I put together. That, you know, because they show up in an email. Yeah, do I have a legendary New York hardcore show we're going to announce in 2 weeks and I'm psyched for it? Fuck yeah. Did I start drawing the flyer for it? Fuck yeah. But guess what? It's the show I could homebrew that I'm going to have more instinctual value to like try to build it out and make it something special. And I've got one of them I'm cooking for fucking February at the church. It's instinctually to build stuff that you like to do, homebrew, you know, and that I enjoy the most, but I'm not able to do that as much because tour packages come more often and we've got to balance what's coming in with what's going out. And that's, I think, the thing I would probably change the business is get a little bit smarter. And I got a cousin who's going to help me do it, teach me about these things like business lines of credit that'll keep us from capital spending. And I need to learn it. I never did.
Yeah.
And so that's the long and short of how I run business. It's on faith, it's on goodwill, it's on community, it's on longevity, and it's on what does money do. If I don't pay the bands well, they can't get to the next show. If I don't pay the local bands, can they make T-shirts for the first time? This is the instinctual stuff that helps you build a community, not, hey, I'd love to pay you $100 as an opener, but then I don't make $100. It's like, what's $100 is if this seed of $100 makes that band a band that starts drawing more in the next 6 months. And a lot of promoters don't do that, but we do that. We instinctually put value to our local bands, our new bands, hoping that they grow so our thing continues. And that's why talking in business sense about profit margins and all stuff is like actually the easiest way to fail into being a good hardcore promoter. Is going, where's the profit? Because there's none in the long term.
Two things. One, I love how you're like, I never learned about business lines of credit. All I can think of is old white trash Rob. I'm not that kind of white.
I'm not. I've never been.
you
Never been.
know, and which, by the way, your interview with him on your podcast was
I love
fucking
him.
phenomenal, bro.
I love
Dude.
him. I love him. I wish we had. I felt like it was a good time to have him, and I feel like I want to reconnect with him. He's been a little bit dodgy, and he is what he is.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more to Rob than most people, and I got lucky in 2005. 2005, he was obviously heavy smoking because he was in addiction. Him
Right.
and Jeff Cold as Life were on that tour, and even though they smoked, I hate cigarette smoke. It's grossing me out. But hanging out with them guys every single day, they would get coffee. I'd go to get coffee with them. We'd hang outside. We'd talk. Just
Yeah.
gleaning from him and understanding both of them. There's like, I looked at them and not try to emulate. I looked at them and go, all I had to do was live near them and grow up next to them. And it's a similar, like my life was parallel in
Yeah.
many ways. The way we grew up, I just chose not to drink. I chose not to do these things. And that's the only semblance of differences. We both found ourselves in the same scene. We both found ourselves in the same tour with the different bands at the same time. And so different choices, and we still found up ourselves in the same order. I never will count myself as a peer of them because I always looked to them and they were before me. And I look to them as like people who put things into perspective for me. But that's what my podcast I try to do as much as I can. It's hard to get some of the, like I got Mike Scored last week. And
Yeah,
it was great
I saw.
He's one of my heroes, and he's just a great guy, and I love his fucking band. And his outlook on, we talk a lot more about history and the Crusades and a lot of stuff because he's well versed in that. And I've always been a student of that and own several $100s worth of books on the subject. I look to these people for inspiration because, dude, they had I can't speak enough about looking at addiction as like the biggest fear of my life because it attached so many people. And then to see people that I admire or I go, wow, this really amazing thing these guys did. You would say that you could romantically say people like romanticized in movies, like obviously Sid and Nancy was one of my first favorite punk rock movies, and it's the ultimate heroine story. And they maybe romanticized it, and maybe DiCaprio with the Basketball Diaries romanticized heroin in the '90s. But in the same breath, these people that we're talking about in punk rock and hardcore excelled despite addiction. They excelled despite of the fucking demons on their back, and they ended up creating stuff that is otherworldly. And you almost have to give them their respect of they did this creatively despite the pain and what it is to be an addicted person.
Dude, I mean, I can't tell. I mean, obviously, as a guy that's shot heroin, there's an automatic connection when you're listening to somebody's music and they've been through those same feelings, right? It's like I listen to Romola and Oscar Cotton. You know how many times I fucking got on with a needle right as he's like, I want to die in an opium sunrise?
Yeah.
And like even today, I mean, that's probably what the most listened to hardcore band in my rotation, Living in Exile, Outlaw Anthems. I mean, it's like you can tell that dude is speaking from a real ass place. I didn't even know about Sinners and Saints until I listened to your podcast.
Yeah, they did actually one show in Philadelphia. Mark is probably one of the most unsung dudes in Boston punk rock. And they just had this Bridge 9 moment where they were doing shit. And, he's I can't imagine what it's like to just rip out rippers so easily as these guys can. But there was something special about Sinners and Saints in that it was, if they did 4 records, more like the Street Dogs, they probably would have lost value. But the fact that the two guys got together and did that like little bit of thing, it shows you like fuck, like this is like a 1-2 punch from this. And Mark, last time I saw Mark was about 8 years ago, but I did Ducky Boys with Cockney Rejects and Sick of It All in 2013, and me and Mark talked, and he was like, he had a lot of really good stories about family life, and he's another guy that's in the hierarchy of we're creating a new list of get to people for the podcast, and Mark's got to be one of them because I trek so deep into the heavier hardcore stuff, but my heart will always be in a lot of the traditional fast hard, like obviously like I'd rather have a conversation with Roger than Vinny, even though Vinny's funnier because Roger has this like there's a lot of cool shit I think about with the Roger and the books that he's written. And I think about like Mark being he's really talented and lesser respected of the two. And the Ducky Boys was like one of my favorite Boston bands when they first came out. Like got to see them a couple of times. I love that style, and I feel like hardcore has walked away from it, and because of stupid bands like Shattered Realm.
So
people have to go back to getting into that shit.
when I think of, so like I spent a lot of time at the Auto Bar growing up in Baltimore, and they used to put on a shit ton of great shows, and honestly, I think one of my favorites of all time was Full Blown Chaos, Outbreak, Champion, and Agnostic Front was the bill.
Yeah.
It was a fucking phenomenal lineup.
Well, that was back when they had the confidence. That was back when they had the real confidence to book mixed bills.
I mean, every one of those bands is like a totally different vibe, but still under that hardcore realm.
Well, and that's really what it is. It was like if I can remember, there was two separate tours kind of merging at the same time. And this is the other thing that happens now is bands used to bring two bands, like a headliner plus two. Now a headliner is the headliner plus three. So now you don't have an opener. And I actually spoke off the record, well, not off the record, but like when the podcast was over, Mike and I were talking. And I said the biggest reason why there isn't more mixed bills in punk rock and metal mixing is because the show gets booked with four bands, not two. And
Right.
back in the day, there could be two metal bands and two punk rock. Oh, same show? Lock them in.
Yeah.
Let's get it. We'll get both crowds.
Right.
And that's gone. That's gone now. You can't convince Leftover Crack to tour with Sick of It All. You can't. I mean, you can't get. And that's a weird, but it's an honest thing. You can't pull these two things together anymore because everybody wants a 4-band package.
Right.
And it eliminates the mix of the two. And when you're selling a room, you got 30 days on a calendar. You're trying to get as much in there as possible. The other thing is, well, if I got them two tours, I'm gonna have two separate shows. But no, man, that one show could really fucking pop, and that's why 2012 I did Cockney Rejects, Cro-Mags, Wisdom of Chains, and Nightbirds. It was that hardcore, but the Nightbirds, the punk hardcore.
Yeah.
You got, and those balances, they become key to like more people being at the show. Whereas today's hardcore 10 years later now, we're dealing with the same kid with the same ninja kick for four fucking bands.
Right, right.
We have to break that cycle as well, because just like I have to break the cycle of like old guy brings young band, we got to balance the out. Like it can't just be all young kids, it can't be all old bands, because you want the value of a mixed crowd, and I don't see as much of a mixed crowd as I used to.
Right, right. Yeah, that's true, because back in the day there'd be like a metalcore band, a more punk leaning band, like a straight hardcore, band. I mean, it was a golden era. I think a lot of it too, people just wanted to mosh. And so if there was a two-step in there, some semblance of a breakdown, good to go.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of it is that the dance floor and the sing-along have to maintain, and I feel like the balance is lost. And I'm the worst hypocrite saying this because the Shattered Realm shit has sing-alongs, but the asshole mosh is always going to be there. But there's a balancing point where you have TUI, TUI was the early band that was heavy, but they had the big sing-alongs of the modern era. But when the first time we did Bulldoze at this hardcore was 2010, and TUI played, and they had a great set. People were afraid to go up front to sing the Bulldoze. When Bulldoze did the reunion 2 years back with the FYA and Keystone Jam, I told them, I mean, the kids are going to sing all the words. You don't have to do anything. When the Bulldoze did their reunion, and you look at Bulldoze, that set was mostly sing-alongs. And a lot of these heavier bands, because kids hadn't seen them, they remembered all the words. So you have the cartwheel kicking stuff happening to some degree, but nothing like everyone wanting to take the mic. And a lot of these heavier bands now, like when I did Marauder in 2018 at this hardcore, it was yeah, but you know what it wasn't? It wasn't like an open pit. It was everybody taking all the fucking words, taking all the mic.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like taking the mic.
I mean, dude, that Master Killer album is just such a classic at this point that everyone wants a piece of that mic.
Yeah, I mean, but those songs weren't made exactly for that.
No.
It just comes from repetition of them not playing too much, them not playing themselves out. And you know, you can give some credit to the Hardlord dudes, like way over capping it. When I say like people are like, this should be the most important record of hardcore, it's like, no, it wasn't even considered a hardcore record. They signed to Century Media. Century Media was an import record label. So when I went to the store to buy that record, that was $15 a CD when hardcore CDs were $10 and Victory CDs were $12. Why am I going to buy the $15 thing? So I bought it on cassette instead because I ain't paying $15 for a CD at the time.
Right.
For those listening, CDs were still very new. CDs were still a new thing when I bought the CD. So I didn't spend it I didn't buy my first two CDs. My cousin and my grandma came up when my mother graduated college, just associate's degree. And they brought me a boombox that was a CD player, which I never had before. And I got Carcass Heartwork and Far Beyond Carcass Heartwork and Far Beyond Driven were the two CDs that were brand new. And my older cousin Billy was like, Graham, get them these two. These are the two new metal CDs. Far Beyond
Carcass
Driven
Heartwork
is the first CD that I physically wore out playing. I actually saw Pantera on that Far Beyond Driven tour in Philly, and we liked them. But Carcass, to me, because they came from like the death metal sound, Philly you could always get all those CDs because of Relapse Records and all like the stuff like that. So like I was hip to Brujeria and a lot of that stuff at a young age, but hearing the earlier Carcass records and it just being different and technical and respecting the guitar work, when Carcass came out and they added that like melodic Swedish technical style, when you hear them first dueling leads, you're like, what the I only saw them once in that period, and then when they did the reunion, I was on house arrest, but I was able to get out to it, and I got to see them at the Starland Ballroom, and actually stood next to my buddy. Me and the guy from Floor Punch, Mark Porter, stood next to each other. He's like, dude, I'm like, this is gonna be like the legendary, and seeing them return, and then when they came out with Surgical Steel, I've seen them a bunch of times since. Carcass is by far like almost like the Pinky Up, like the great aristocratic death metal, but they're still so fucking good. It's insane. And I remember rocking a Carcass hat and having a Carcass hoodie, and people being like, the death metal is like, that's not even like real death metal. It's almost like grindcore. And I'm like, dude, you gotta figure that had to be like that had to be 91 or 92, where it's like, you know, like Carcass wasn't even drawing 300, 400 people at the time. Like, you know, like death metal was a lot smaller, and I really liked the blasting. I liked all the different shit, you know, like, and then when you hear it, that Heartwork is a metal and a music masterpiece at the same time. And you know what came after it? I mean, Jesus Christ! Like, think about what would have came from a band like Children of Bodom.
My God!
Had there was no Heartwork. What would have happened to some of these? What would have happened to some of these bands if these guys didn't write that? And like where metal went, I mean, you can't make the argument as much for at the gates, but I'm sure even that little nudge, because Slaughter the Soul came a couple years later, I'm sure even they heard Carcass and was like, all right, now we got some new writing to do, boys. Like this is
Yeah,
like this,
yeah.
like even though they were already a band by that time, I think that truly influenced metal to just get in such a different melodic tone, and them song structures and everything. It's like actually like genre defying records, you know?
100%. So, like I said earlier, I was buddies with the guys in Summer's End, and John, the guitar player, is that's basically where I learned about everything outside of like punk rock and hardcore, and like learned everything metal because he had just been in all these different types of metal bands, and I mean, it's like really a phenomenal guitarist. And I remember the first time hearing Heartwork and just being like blown away. And wore that shit out. One thing I always think about whenever I think about that record, rest in peace to my man Trevor from Black Dahlia Murder. The first time I ever met him, I almost punched him in the face because he pinched my nipple, but
Oh, I hate that. I
I
hate the
saw
titty,
his
but
Heartwork tattoo, and I was like, I had just seen them like 2 months before, and I was seeing them again, and I was like, "Oh, you're the singer from Black Dahlia Murder," and so I didn't punch him. And I bought him a drink. We both got kicked out because I was underage, and he was like, "This is my show. This is my show." He had to call his manager. They got us both back in. I was like, after that, every time they played in Baltimore, he put me on guest list. If they were playing in Virginia, he would put me on the guest list. He'd be like, "Just hit me up." And I probably saw them like 20 times. Went and hung out with them at Ozfest. They were on a bus with It Dies Today, which I had actually already met the guitarist from there because I saw them with Full Blown Chaos, Hatebreed, and God Forbid in Virginia.
God
Yeah.
forbids my God.
Oh, dude, those guys
And
seem super cool. Um,
I
I mean, it
booked
was.
them. I booked them with their demo tape they sent to my mother's house, and the conversation I had with Dallas, not Doc. I was always closer with Dallas and Doc, even though Punishment would play a ton of shows with God Forbid over time. He was like, "Yeah, man, we're really like an at the gates kind of band," and I'm thinking to myself, "This is 1998," and I'm like, "What kind of fucking psycho is telling me their band sounds like At the Gates?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just heard this tape. Dude, you guys want to come play?" We put them in the suburbs, and watching them play, it was like, full. All right, it was like dudes with beards rolling against kids that were 12 years old, like like grown ass men. Like
Yeah.
our band sucked, and their bands were so goddamn good. We were just like, what is this? And over the time from '98 to 2000, and then by 2001 they did the Cradle Fill tour. But those
Hmm.
first 3 years, Punishment got to play with them a bunch, and then we always supported them guys. That was like, I don't listen to the last couple records as much as I listened to the first two, but that was the greatest merging of like the Swedish European style metal into like the metallic, almost like American style breakdowns that I had ever heard, man. And it sucks that I don't know whatever. I don't really care or know anything about Dallas and Doc beefing, but I've always just think of them as like the perfect duo because they were brothers who grew up together. Like they were going to shows before they were ever in that band. Like we knew them from Jersey shows, and like, dude, like they would come and play full ass all hardcore shows, and the whole place would destroy. Like one of the most insane sets at every single show when they were coming up, and just really, it just shows you that even when a band isn't like the hardcore band, if you're in the right vibe and you're playing that shit, the people are going to gravitate to you, and it's how you react to them. Like I don't have the young boy status of like when Black Dahlia Matter and Acacia Strain and all them bands were just playing hall shows. I booked one show for Acacia Strain earlier on in there, but not like when they were brand new. And it just didn't gravitate in Philly, so I was never the guy that did it until I only recently started doing Acacia Strain shows for whatever purpose. They were like, "Hey, Joe's the guy to go to," and I'm happy that it is. But I feel like that world separated naturally, and then in Philadelphia it merged as like kids who go to some of the shows, but the kids who are going to go to Black Dahlia or going to Acacia Strain, they ain't trying to hear no Judge. But I don't like to hear it. I privately like, don't tell me you can go to that shit and you
Dude.
don't. And then they're like, nah, I never really fucked with Cro-Mags. And I made a bunch of the young kids come to see them when we did at this small venue you've probably been to called Voltage Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
I did Judge and Wisdom and Change at Voltage. And a bunch of them
Just
younger kids.
like you, I chose a path.
Any person who wants to see one of the best Judge sets of all time, go to I think it's 2016 or 2015 at Voltage Judge Show at Hey 56, and you'll see people jumping off the top of the PA. The crowd was more nuttier than it's ever been, you know?
That's fucking amazing, dude.
Yeah, that. So like I say that along the thing of like the kids who were the Acacia Strain fans, they would play there. I was like, "You're gonna go? That's not for me." And it's like, I look at like some of the stuff that's not in hardcore doesn't really have a place. But if the kids are going to the same room for the same, they might like both. But I find a tenuous disconnect where they don't feel like they kind of. You know, that there shouldn't be that disconnect because you know what? I went and seen punk bands, I went and seen ska bands, I went and seen skinhead bands, techno bands, goth bands, industrial bands, all in the same rooms. Even the emerging, what now people call post-hardcore, we never called it post-hardcore, but like we've seen all them bands coming up, and no one ever cared about like no one ever gave themselves maybe you say you're a skinhead, maybe say I'm straight edge, maybe saying like, they know like I'm this, but no one ever like said, I don't like that kind of music because it was all coming up. And
right.
now like you get to some goofy subset. Well, this band has a couple more breakdowns and they have scrims in front of their amps. So I like this more than the hardcore bands that sound almost exactly like it. Never made sense.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You know, what do you see for the future of hardcore? Over the next
the end. The end. And
I mean, I never thought I would see a Turnstile song in an Apple commercial. That's for sure.
What was Turnstile for them today is a Turnstile for us.
Oh.
And you know, like, so there was Jefferson Starship, but there was Jefferson Airplane. Jefferson Airplane played Woodstock, and they ripped it. And Jefferson Starship was on some bullshit. I'm not saying Turnstile is on some bullshit because
it's just different.
They're just, I don't even look at them as the same byproduct because their element is so far different that you can't compare the two fairly. It's no denigration. It's just saying what is now wasn't what was then. And as long as you can compartmentalize, I say this about, again, I've been a fan of music. You talk about 2024. So the Carcass CD was in my player in 1993 or 1994, whenever that record came out. So think about that. I've been listening to my own CDs since I was 12 and 13 years old, when CDs first came out. Before that, I had my own cassette tapes. Before that, I was looking at the Ozzy Osbourne, the Dio records, the Parliament Funkadelic records, all the record covers sitting on the floor of every apartment we ever lived in, and listened to that music. I know a shit ton about classic music, a shit ton about like the Woodstock era music because of my parents. You know, like I have a decent grasp of music. So bands do change and morph into something far different than what they started. You know, like no one's calling Ozzy a sellout for taking Black Sabbath out of the pubs in England. You sold out the pubs, bruv. You sold out. No one. They all want to get bigger. No one disses Steve Harris for being the biggest rock star in all of England with Iron Maiden. You know, like no one. And to that point though is like you also can't walk two dogs with one leash. Like when you get to the point where you're in major label scenarios and you're playing to tens of thousands, unless you're in Europe or somewhere weird where that's just their fest culture, which now is permeated into American fest culture, which is an entire other podcast. And we're already at 3 hours, so I don't want to go to a segue there. But we're at the point where hardcore bands who carry the flag in the DIY scenarios in the independent booked rooms are now going to be fiscally solvent enough to exist in the commercial entity known as regular ass music. And when a 58-year-old guy named Reds, who's been my guy, I've been working with him for years, says, "Hey Joe, you know that Turnstile band? And I look at him like, is this what could happen? And I'm like, what's up? He's like, I heard them on the jukebox at the bar, and I said, oh, let me look this up. And the first video was them from Hardcore, because they call the fest Hardcore, because they know I do a festival.
Yeah.
And he's like, yo, you booked that band years ago? I'm like, yeah, when they were small. Now they're a huge band. And God willing, from time to time, they'll do small little iterative shows.
Right.
But it means nothing to the world of
Right.
Joe Hardcore. Cool, Turnstile's going to play something? Sounds great. Their market and their livelihood is going to be on selling big rooms out and making a coach.
Right.
No one, Mr. Vitale, the singer of Backtrack, who's now the most important manager in hardcore, this motherfucker, he's the one who could have Turnstile do a DIY show like Bob did for FYA.
Right.
They'll probably still do them, and I don't denigrate them, and I'm not saying you guys ain't hardcore no more. I'm saying is
Right.
their fan base is longer and wider than the breadth of what hardcore scene is today. And that goes back to everything. Yeah, I would love to hear bands that emerge with a sound that goes back to, as the guys have been saying, roots level hardcore. Stuff that emits the fast rhythms of the Bad Brains, maybe a little bit less of the metallic breakdowns. I would love to see that happen, but it's harder for someone who's in their 20s to emulate something that came out when they were not alive. And we can't argue about cosplay, like, oh, they're not really doing it, because they're emulating the style of music. So you always know that things are going to go back 20 years and check it out. But, like,
Right.
the focus of hardcore is always going to be on what's new and popping. And sometimes rehashing stuff is going to happen. But I think ultimately the core spirit of DIY, the core spirit of a shit has been weakened every 5 or 10 years. And I don't see in 2030... I don't see the end of hardcore, because that can't change. The records
Right.
that always existed, the pantheon of records that will always exist, to be like, and your pantheon of your best hardcore records aren't my pantheon, but they're your experience. So you're always going to live in that experience that you had. Eventually, we're going to get to a point that the most modern, new hardcore is so far from the original, to the point where we talk about swing and the early points of jazz that were in the pre-World War II time. And 50 years later, jazz sounded like the weirdest shit ever. That's what's going, and that's already happened in hardcore. And hardcore is in the next, because it's almost, depending on who you want to argue with, you're almost at 50 years of hardcore, or 51 years of hardcore, or 52 years of hardcore, or as punk rock is about to hit 76, which will be fucking 50 years of punk rock has changed. Hardcore will change for the majority. And every little iterative step of people who found hardcore will stick to their records or their thing. Maybe some people will celebrate all the different decades, but I think the days of doing basement shows will never end. I think the songs and music are going to get so amalgamated and mushed together. It's like when you have an awesome plate at turkey dinner and you just smush it all together. I think that's what it sounds like. You're not going to have these individual little things. And for better or worse, it's really out of my hands. I'm going to go with the flow, book the stuff I like, avoid the stuff I don't like, because someone else is already going to book it, and I'm going to share the rest of my time that I can doing the things I like, with the people I like, for the stuff that I like, and I'm not going to shoot my shot at things that I'm not have a part of, because I plan to put out a couple books. I've been getting better with my drawing. I'm getting a little bit better with my painting. There's still stuff I'd like to do with the bands, do a little bit of Shout at Rome, and do a little bit of releasing some stuff. There's going to be a 25 years of punishment thing we're putting together, and, stuff like that I like to do. And, my priority is doing the things I want to do more so than talk about the things I don't like. And I spent a lot of time as a kid shooting shots on shit that don't matter, wasting positive energy on that shit. So I'm not trying to go there anymore, Elliot.
I love that, Joe. What's crazy, we've talked for 3 hours, and I feel like there's so many topics of conversations that I wanted to talk about that we didn't even get to touch on, and I hope that we can have an opportunity to dive in some more, because I like I said, there's a ton of things I wanted to talk about, but you're so well versed in so many different things, Joe.
I got the name. The last thing we'll leave this with is, I got the name Joe Hardcore because of a band, Tribe 13, having a song called Joe Hardcore. And the joke was the singer sang so fast, no one really understood what he was saying. So it was not it wasn't someone showing up going, you are now Joe Hardcore. The joke was half because I was a long hair kid, shitty pants, didn't
A
look
long
like a
hair.
hardcore, super long hair, didn't look the part, and people started mockingly calling me Joe Hardcore between the Tribe 13 and the fact I didn't even look like a hardcore dude. And that's why it was a mock that I've now worn and celebrated myself with. Because it's way better than people knowing your last name, even though now on the thing I don't care. You can know my last name.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I've weathered the storm, and I've spent most of my time in hardcore having conversations with people, and I'm 169 episodes into my own podcast where I spend 2 to 4 to 5 hours. So talking long is something I've gotten pretty good at.
Man, I love it. Actually, before you go, I told a buddy of mine I was going to be talking to you. He said he knew you from around the scene. He told me to ask you about your encounters fighting with security at the Chameleon Club.
Oh, yeah, we got we'll set the scene. It was Converge. It was Converge American Nightmare in the year 2002, and they were doing this tour that was pretty big. And we had traveled out at the time. Nikki from Horror Show, who's now in that shoegaze band, Nothing. George from Blacklisted. They were like the two guys who went to every like American Nightmare show and stage dive and do all this crazy shit. So a bunch of the Philly boys roll out in a car or two, and we go to. I have always hated the Chameleon because the security sucks. Since the first time we went there, the security sucked. And we're talking 97, 98. We hated the fucking Chameleon. But this is a raggedy ass place where the show is. Things are so much better now that all the guys do shows in other places in South Central Pennsylvania, as they call it. There's better rooms and better places now. And the minute American Nightmare plays, the guys start stage diving, and it turns into an all-out war because they're choking my friend. They're truly choking my friend with it, like Homer Simpson style, hands across throat.
No. Eyes bugging out and all that.
And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I had, at the time, already started working security. I took security classes, how to get people out of the room. I literally did. I worked outside of one of the hustles was, a couple weekends. Work outside, take IDs. I was already big enough that I could do that a couple places. So we were never taught to choke or anything like that. So I'm like, yo, you kick him out. Fair point. Don't grab his fucking neck like that. And then we're going back and forth. And this guy tried to do basically a behind the back wrist lock. And I wasn't having it because we were taught wrist locks way back in that bouncing situation. I grabbed him by his elbow, got wrist and elbow control. I was like, do you want to do this or you want to calm the fuck down? I said, I'll walk. I like it. Since I was a child getting kicked out of the Trocadero, my rule was I'll walk out. If I was wrong, they could point to me and go, get out. If I punched somebody, I was a dickhead. Young kid. So I got my jaw wired twice in the same 6 weeks at the same club, fighting with my jaw wired. I was a dickhead. So, but I didn't want to wrestle. I would eventually, every once in a while, grab me on my shoulder. Come on, Joe, you gotta. And it got to the point where, come on, man, you know what you did. I'm like, you're right. Yeah. Sorry, I'll go outside. And so that's how that shit would work for me. So I'm like, I'll walk myself out. I'm a fucking grown man, even though I'm only 21 years old. I'm like, I'm a fucking grown man.
You're grown man. Yeah.
Don't fucking put your fucking hands on me. As we're getting out, they're starting to do the business where you can see the security. An adult would say, hey, those guys are leaving. Fuck it. Let them go. Hey, make sure those guys leave. These guys roll out like they're going to jump us. It's like, I don't know what redneck shit you're on, but, where the fuck we're at, we'll fight all night. So, the minute I was like, yo, you got to let go, Mike. You got to let go. If I let go, he starts giving me the shove. He gave me another shove, and I'm like, shoving it for a kid of the 80s is like, that's a fight. You shove
That's
me,
it. We're fighting. Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, this pussy's got one more shove from behind, and I'm gonna jack his ass. The minute he shoved me right before the door, I pulled him the fuck outside. From that point, shit happened outside. This chick ran outside with the largest bottle of mace ever. And she starts macing. But as soon as we saw her, I'm like, yo, run! We ran away from it, and she maced most of the security guys. We hid in a bush. We hid in a bush like 2 blocks away. Cops eventually sort of looked at us, and we're kind of like, and we're just chilling like we're not doing nothing, and we got in the car and went back to Philly. But the bouncers were such dickheads, and I remember getting yelled at, like, what the fuck are you guys fighting? It's like, we're not fighting. This guy, and I said to him, this guy's choking him. Like, you got your fucking hand around some dude's fucking throat. That's not kicking someone the fuck out.
Right.
Unfortunately,
that's not de-escalation.
Well, not de-escalation. You remove the person from the premises. You can easily take their legs out from under them, get them to the ground, calm them down. But you don't do blood. You don't like. They weren't even. They're like Homer Simpson choking. We're not talking about blood chokes. We're not talking about We're not talking like Jiu-Jitsu shit. We're talking like you could break this dude's fucking throat. You could crack his fucking windpipe. And then what are you gonna do? Now you're gonna have a lawsuit? Oh, he did blah blah blah. That's the redneck shit that doesn't happen anymore. And something doesn't happen in hardcore anymore because a lot of the shows aren't in them kind of clubs.
Right.
I love fighting a bouncer. I still just like I still love fighting a bouncer because I hate them so much because they're just dicks.
Always.
It's just because like, yo, chill, man. Like, who the fuck are you? Like, what? You got the shirt on? You're undefeated. You're Mike Tyson. Like, fuck you.
See, I've always been under 200 pounds, so I'm a small guy. They're usually lifting me up. A couple of them just lifting the legs right out from under me, you know?
Man, I wasn't in the 200s until I was probably damn near 30 or 31 or 32. Then I went up to 280 just being reckless with cheesesteaks. Just reckless with cheesesteaks.
Well,
but I'll tell you this, as a small dude, you can dip in and get under. And my dad was 5'8" at most. But he was scrawny and a small build, and he would just show like the not exactly a peekaboo, but how to move and dip, move and dip, move and dip, move and dip, and you learn a little bit from our neighborhood. Everyone kind of could throw hands, so you'd watch, mimic. We had a lot of connections to people that box, so you learn basics of how to move your hand, and it's distance. That's why I related to jiu-jitsu so much. It's distance control.
Right.
So these guys, they're only good if they get their fucking hands on you, but you better get your fucking hands on me. Right. And you start grabbing me goofy, I'm putting my thumb in your eye off the rip, thumb in the eye. I don't care. And that's how sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying bouncers get me mad because for years, like we got to a point where a lot of the local, like the truck bouncers, everyone's new, so they basically give you the look like get out or we're gonna kick you out. But it was always the TLA bouncers on South Street. And then later on, when my friends went from being the majority of the bouncers in the Electric Factory until they weren't, fighting with the bouncers at different clubs was like the greatest thing on earth. Like, we got maced in, all of us collectively, PA Hardcore, like all the dudes from Mushmouth, some of the straight fruit, we all got maced at so many Allentown shows, fighting outside for fighting Nazis, or a fight that started inside with Nazis, then we'd go outside, we'd fight the bouncers. Like, the bouncers were like the best thing to fight because they were always up for it and we're always up for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I can't believe I got me all ramped up at 9 o'clock. I was like, yeah, I remember But to me, it was like cops and robbers, good guys versus bad guys. It was fucking great.
It really was, So you might be able to get away with some shit at one show, but then they're gonna catch it at the next one. It's like, all right, I'm out of here. What's your favorite cheesesteak spot in Philly, man? As a connoisseur, man.
The ones you go to in South Philly are trash. John's roast pork in South Philly has roast pork and cheesesteaks in South Philly. That's my fucking go-to. Fuck you, Zach Barone. I don't care about Angelo's. I love John's roast pork. I love their cheesesteak. It's my favorite. It's right off of Columbus Boulevard, in between the right near the Lowe's, down near where the old boat was. In my neighborhood where I live now, I live closest to the cheesesteak of all cheesesteaks, D'Alessandro's, and that shit. And now that they have COVID, made every cheesesteak place in Philadelphia better because no one was allowed to go inside. All these places were so small, you would get jammed up and elbowed. Yeah. And you can't get your fucking steak. So John's now has a window where you go up to. Now you can call ahead and order at John's. D'Alessandro's, you call, they text you when your order's ready. No more than standing in this little ass line, getting elbowed like a rugby scrum to get your cheesesteak.
Right.
Also, side out for Philly only people, Philly area people, fuck Chubby's. I know people say Chubby's. Chubby's across the street from D'Alessandro's, and people are like, this Diego, my boy Drew, loves this fucking Chubby's. It's ass. So South Philly, don't go to Pat's, don't go to Gino's, you go to John's Roast Pork. Now, if it's late night, I'm still gonna say go to D'Alessandro's if you can. I grew up in a neighborhood not near any of these things. So back in the day, when Lehigh Avenue comes in at Kensington Ave, the long
Yeah.
2-foot cheesesteaks, I lived
Mm.
near there for a long time. On top of it, all them little corner stores, all them little corner pizza stores, all the way up from Kensington Ave to Frankfurt Ave, and every little neighborhood is a banging cheesesteak that nobody caps about because nobody knows it's there. And I'm going to tell you, I lived in a bunch of different places through these neighborhoods. I'm going to tell you that Aramingo's best on Aramingo Avenue, not quite Allegheny, not quite Lehigh, banging fucking cheesesteak that no one talks about. There's all these little spots, Old London, banging fucking cheesesteak. There's all these little spots that don't make the high grade that are fucking banging. And I'm glad people don't cap it because I can go there and just get my fucking shit. But I would put in the pantheon of 3, my choice over any of it is always going to be John's. And after John's, I'm going to go Delos Angeles because it's the closest. And then if you're up in the Northeast, it's Steve's Prince of Steaks all day. The only reason
Steve's Prince of Steaks is great.
That is if you do that, people are like, I don't like the whiz. I don't do the whiz. I do extra American, and it's so gooey and it comes out and it's fucking banging. The only reason why I don't go there, and I lived closest to there for a long period of time, the only reason why I didn't ever fuck with that was that in Frankfurt, there was cheesesteaks in every single corner. Every single corner had a cheesesteak place. So why am I going to go up somewhere else? I ain't got a car. You know, I'm going to go here. And then when I lived in Kensington and Port Richmond, I went down there. So just living in all the different neighborhoods, I would say if you're up in the Northeast Philly and you ate anything but a Steve's, and you can even go to the Buck County Steve's, and it's just as fucking good. But I would say those are the 3. In order, I eat a lot of Steve's because Mike Barletti at Mike Hooligan, the fucking Hard Times Tattoo, my brother, that's his favorite cheesesteak place. If you're in the far Northeast, Cafe Carmela. If you're anywhere in the far Northeast past, dude, Cafe Carmela cheesesteak's insane. It's just far. I can't order it. They're not going to drive to my house. I have to drive there. But we get that to the tattoo shop. Oh, it's fucking banging. And R.I.P. to M Street, George's Pizza. For a long time, George's Pizza was the neighborhood pizza we all go to. Typical Philly neighborhood shit. Someone robbed the place and his son got shot and killed, so they closed it. But back in the day, M Street, George's Pizza, solid. And it's gone.
I grew up, I have a sentimental attachment to old Tony Luke's down in South Philly, man. That's where we would go when we would come up for Phillies games. My dad was a Dodgers fan. That was the only team around us that played the Dodgers. So we would come up to Philly games. We always hit Tony Luke's. And then a bunch of my homies were big fans of Jim's. So we'd always end up there too. Rest in peace to Jim's.
No, Jim's they rebuilt. That was a scam.
Oh, did they?
That was a scam. That was what they called the Jewish lightning. Magically, a fire happened. Now
gotcha.
A fire happened. They rebuilt and they took the part that burnt out and they added to the store. That shit was insurance shit.
Yeah, gotcha.
I fucked with a lot of gyms, but Ishkabibbles right down the street was always better. And then
fair. I spent a lot of time. Steaks on South for a time was pretty good.
Tony Luke's is on the weird side of South Philly that you have to drive past to get to. And 4 blocks on the other side is where John's Roast Pork. I've been to Toke Luke's. Do you know that the guy bought in the Tony Luke's and ratted Tony Luke's out for not recording cash to steal the business? So I don't fuck with him. Yeah, the partner stole the business.
I can't fuck with them anymore. Is that That was probably around the time that they started franchising it out and shit too.
So they got their steaks in the supermarket. They try to get bigger and so the guy ratted the family out for not recording cash coming in to steal the fucking business. So we don't fuck with them. If I'm in that,
thanks for the heads up because I'm going to John's Roast Pork now.
And also late at night, my Union Hall is closest to Phillips. So occasionally after the Union Hall meetings, we'll go to Phillips. But if you got to go late night, if you have to go in South Philly, Phillips is the way. It's a little bit further south down, but Phillips is the better of all the flat cheeses that are open late at night is Phillips. And Tony Luke's, they're no good. The guy's a rat.
I guess I'm done at Tony Luke's then.
It's over, man.
Hey, you're up in the Northeast. Are you?
No,
Have
I'm
you?
I'm in I'm in Mount Airy now.
Oh,
I'm in the
gotcha.
Northwest. I'm up in between Germantown and Mount
Oh
Airy.
shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So
Moved
you're on the
up,
other side.
moving on up. Yeah. Why were you gonna
Yeah.
ask me? What about Northeast?
I was gonna say, I was gonna see if you ever go to, there's like a Russian bathhouse, the Banya
Everybody.
up there,
Yeah, all
dude.
my boys go to the Banya. They just recently went. I was like, yo, I'm at work, cause I can't take
Dude,
over.
the fuck. So
Yeah,
my buddy, he trains at a Russian gym up there, Kozma BJJ, and it's
I drive by it. I know all the ways to
dude.
get. I know how to get through the counties by sneaking through the back end, and I
Mhm.
see that and I'm like, that's either the toughest gym ever, or it's
Dude.
or it's nothing. Because you know, there's
He's only
random.
open Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He doesn't care about being like a real gym. He trains like almost solely like Russian, Dagestani Muslim kids and like some
That's
adult
crazy.
Russian. Like, dude, he's got a black belt that's like a SWAT cop in Philly, and he goes and wins every local tournament. His name's Alex. He's a fucking savage, bro. He's trying to be
I
a
gotta look
Fed.
them up. I gotta look them
Dude,
up.
yo, so I went to they're like a Vinny Magalish affiliate. And so like
Yeah,
Vinny did a seminar there on like rubber guard. He was the one that was like, you don't have to be flexible for rubber guard, it's about the angles. And dude, I have like a couple little setups from that, but next I'm coming up there probably in the next month or two, bro. Just catch up, hit the banya if your foot's feeling better, get a little jujitsu in,
I would love
you
it. Let's
know.
hope this.
You know.
Carl's trying to talk me into jujitsu as my ankle sprained, and he's talking about
Look,
footlocks. So I'm like,
dude,
what are we talking about? I just got this thing fixed.
I'm gonna tell you this, man. A while back, my buddy actually just got his black belt this past weekend. I was at open mat rolling with him. He's probably 240, smashed my foot coming up on a single leg, and I just started, walking a little bit more, getting a little more stretch in, and then, just put a little ankle brace on there and got my rolls in. Just said, hey, don't fucking touch my ankle or I'm gonna hurt you, you know. And you could find some training partners you trust and work through it. Don't be gentle, you know.
They'll be gentle in the beginning. They love a wrist lock.
Yeah, yeah. Who doesn't though?
Yeah.
Well, look, man, I'm gonna let you go, man. I really appreciate you taking some extra time and
I love it. I love
dude,
conversations like this where they get to go all over.
dude, I'm ADD as shit. I feel like I actually did a pretty good job of like kind of keeping it somewhat contained, or at least
No, it was
on
great.
wherever the topic went. Yeah, you
No.
know. But is there where can people find you? What do you got going on coming up? I know you said a big show in February. I will
The biggest
probably do.
thing the biggest thing that I have going on that matters to me in the sense of telling people about, because I think we sometimes don't reach everybody we should. We have this thing that we've been doing since the actually we did the first one 10 years ago called Keystone Jam. And then we moved it away to like the holiday time, and we've been doing it pretty damn consistently. And so this year's Keystone Jam is Saturday, December 7th. We do this in Reading, Pennsylvania. So Central PA, Baltimore. It's not Philly. It's easy to get to. Big parking lot. This year we had to wait a little bit longer to announce because we had a big headliner who had a lot of other previous engagements to fulfill before we could announce. We've got Kubla Khan with Wisdom and Chains, Shadow Realm,
Mm.
Lionheart, Gridiron, Animal House, Missing Link, Conservative Military Image, D Block, Simulacra, Bayway, Risk, Troy Mort's new band, Last Ride, a band from Altoona that is fucking awesome. No Funeral, which is Cody, who was in every band from Gloves Off and a bunch of new bands. This is a new heavy, very Acacia Strain style No Funeral and opening band Slamwich. The show starts at 12 p.m. That's not the only thing. Now, this is a big holiday thing. A lot of us are miscreants. We don't have the big family. Now my mother and father are dead. We don't have the same kind of normal existence as most people. So this is a great way to get together pre-holidays and spend some time with your own people. But this is where it gets to be the but. The last 2 years, it's also a fucking tattoo convention with all tattooers that are from hardcore. And we got a ton of them, man. Like guys from Philly, Pennsylvania, New York. They just got this guy from Texas that's probably, if you like this crazy, ornate, black and white shit, he's a total straight edge dude, Christopher Jade. He's coming up for it now. Like the names of all of them are so fucking awesome. And we're all tattooed people. We all love a little tattoo. We're gonna. It's literally the coolest thing to have a hardcore fest all day, all night, and usually that weekend's always a good time for UFC. And UFC's free because it's at the bar. You can all go hang in there. It's tons of awesome shit. Bands
Nice.
all night, and we want people to come from all over. It's a holiday jam. Uh, in 2019, Steve Patachio was dressed in a Santa Claus outfit. And in 2020, the kid's pretty young, good, started getting his life together, killed himself because he was struggling, man. And so every year I say this about him. It sucks when we lose somebody in the community, and it sucks when every year the kid who was wearing a Santa Claus ninja kick and everybody's no longer going to be with us. And the holidays affects people like us the most. Like I say every year in the Instagram, you're going to see me say it again. No one shows you that they're eating McDonald's for Thanksgiving and they don't have a family to go to. No one's going to show you that the fridge is empty and that there's not a lot of presents on their Christmas tree. There's shit that happens to a lot of people like us that find this kind of community. You're only going to find it on a big show like this, and we're there for you. Come out and celebrate the Keystone Hardcore Holiday Jam, man. Lagged. Totally lagged. I didn't. Once I realized it, I stopped what I was saying. Yeah, I stopped what I was saying because I realized, like, yeah, you're lagging still a little bit. It happens. Well, yeah, I mean, that could be any of the kids at the show, and then next year he kills himself because of COVID and just being separated from everything. And we don't, I said it before, like, I'll post this on the internet. People like us, we don't have a full fridge around Christmas. We may not have a full big family to go to. We might not even have a big Thanksgiving Day dinner. Like, we don't have the same stuff that normal, regular, everyday square to people have, but we do have the opportunity for these bigger shows closer to holidays to connect with the people and the things that we love. And I hope that everybody realizes it's not what you get for Christmas, it's not what you eat for Thanksgiving, it's that you're living and you're breathing and you got people around you. And sometimes when things are bad, you hide from the world, right? But it's like this is one of them times where if holidays are bad, get around some people, get around some. And I've had people say, "Hey, man, I love that you guys do this because this is what matters to me, and this is the family that I chose, not the family that I have, and at least I got to do something." And it's important for us to continue doing this as long as we can do this. I dropped my phone. um, Everything. We'll email everything, links and everything. Yeah. And honestly, for me, I have an Instagram for Joe Hardcore. I've got the Instagram for This Is Hardcore Fest. I do a podcast every week called the This Is Hardcore Podcast, and we go as long as this usually. So 3 hours ain't shit for me. We just did a 3 hour and we did a 3 hour podcast last week, and I just appreciate being able to talk about hardcore to people that get it, and for people that listen that also get it. I'm blessed that I got to do shows for this long. I'm blessed that people enjoy the bands that I've been. I'm blessed that people respect the body of work, but also that they still support the shit that we do. It's this Hardcore Fest. FYA Fest number 11. For Baltimore people, the first time you may see them is you better go see Stout down in Florida. There's still tickets. And yeah, thank you for having me on. Thanks for the conversation. Congratulations on fighting your demons every day and winning. And I really think that the important thing for people like you is to have stuff like this to give an outlet to speak this stuff into existence. And I'm glad that you're able to do this shit. And I do not look forward to getting tapped out by you, but we should definitely roll together. We love it. Get your get your wish list of what we didn't cover, and I'll come back. Nah, man. Thank you so much, Elliot, and thank you for everything you do. And continue on the path, man. You're killing it, man. You really are doing everything that people need to hear that people can do who are struggling with the addiction.